Sam, it is June 1808. You are standing on a wooden dock at Boston Harbor. The wind is coming off the Atlantic, and you have a piece of paper in your hand. You are a tailor from Rutland, Vermont, named William Reinald Deere. You have just been notified that a cousin has died back in England and left you an inheritance, and you are about to board a ship to go claim it.
I am with you. Standing on the dock, what is in his hand?
Before you board, you write a letter. The letter is to your oldest son, also named William. He is 12 years old, back in Vermont, just starting an apprenticeship with a cabinet maker. Here is what you write to him. Quote, "My dear child, as I am to be absent from you many months, I wish you to attend to a few kinds of instruction from one who has your welfare at heart. Be faithful to your master and to his interests. Be obedient to him and to Mrs. Warren. Be friendly and kind to all the family. Let truth and honesty be your guide, and on no pretense deviate from it. Be dutiful to your mother, kind to your sister and brothers. Have the fear of God before you. Implore his protection, and you will obtain it, and likewise the goodwill of all mankind." End quote.
Wow.
You put the letter in the mail, you board the ship, you are never heard from again.
Pirates? Storm? Did he get there?
Nobody knows. One account says the ship arrived in England with his trunk on board, but he was not on it. The family in Vermont never finds out. Your wife, Sarah, the seamstress, is left with 6 children under the age of 16. The youngest, a 4-year-old boy with red hair, is going to grow up never really remembering his father. His name is John.
John Deere.
John Deere. And the letter that his father wrote from Boston Harbor, that letter that says, "Let truth and honesty be your guide, and on no pretense deviate from it," that is the moral vocabulary that John Deere is going to carry with him for the rest of his life. Across 2 business failures, through twin shop fires, past debtor's prison, to a frontier town in Illinois named after a bend in a river, and into a blacksmith shop where, in 1837, he is going to make a plow that, and we are going to get to this, that he did not actually invent.
Wait. What?
Yeah, that is the story.
Welcome to today's episode. Today, we tell the story of a 189-year-old company that began with a blacksmith who never claimed to invent the thing he is famous for inventing. We tell the story of his son, Charles, who built the legend. We tell the story of how a polished saw blade and one journal entry from 1860 became the most defensible industrial business in America. And we tell the story of how the same software that made it a $100 billion company got it sued by the FTC. I'm Alex.
I'm Sam, and this is John Deere.
Alex, I want to start with the part of the story that, until very recently, almost nobody knew, because it is going to reframe everything else we say in this act.
All right, lay it out for me. What part of the founding myth are we about to break?
Our main source for this episode is a book published in 2005 by Northern Illinois University Press called The John Deere Story. It is written by 2 brothers, Neil and Jeremy Dahlstrom. And here's the key detail. Neil Dahlstrom is, at the time of writing, the corporate archivist at Deere & Company. He has unrestricted access to the company's internal archive. Letters, board minutes, diaries, ledgers, marketing files going back to 1837.
The fox in the hen house, but in a good way.
The fox in the hen house with a key to every cabinet. And here's the book's quiet bombshell. Quote, John Deere never made the claim, nor did the need for such a claim ever occur to him. It was simply not important to his business. His son now disagreed. End quote.
The claim being?
The claim being that John Deere invented the steel plow, which is the thing he is famous for, which is the thing on every fifth-grade history poster in America, according to his own corporate archivist, he didn't. Or, more carefully, he never claimed to, and his son Charles is the one who built the legend that he did.
How do we know this is real and not just a 2005 author trying to be edgy?
The smoking gun is a board of directors decision from 1913. In 1913, 27 years after John Deere has died, the Deere and Company Board of Directors quietly amends the epitaph that appears underneath John Deere's portrait in all company catalogs. The original epitaph read, quote, "Inventor of the steel plow." They change it to, quote, "He gave to the world the steel plow."
That is a beautiful piece of corporate hedging.
It is the most beautiful piece of corporate hedging I have ever seen. It is 6 extra words that mean we know we cannot legally defend the original claim, but we still need the brand to feel like he did it. And here's the thing. That quiet 1913 edit worked, because today, more than a century later, you and I both grew up believing John Deere invented the steel plow.
I literally have a John Deere, inventor of the steel plow poster in my head right now from elementary school.
Right. So the question is, if he didn't invent it, then what did he do? What is the actual story? And the answer, which is going to take us the next 45 minutes, is something more interesting than the legend. It is the story of a guy who took a known idea, married it to better materials, married it to better marketing, married it to a better distribution channel, and through 20 years of grinding work, turned it into the standard.
He didn't invent it, he industrialized it.
He industrialized it. Hold on to that phrase. Okay, Act 1.
Sam, before we get to John Deere arriving in Illinois, I want to spend a few minutes on Illinois itself, because the listener needs to feel what the prairie was, and I think this is the part of the story that almost every retelling skips. The Illinois prairie in the 1830s, the first thing you need to know is the grass. The dominant species is something called big blue stem. Big blue stem on a normal year grows 6 to 8 feet tall, on a good year 12 feet. Now picture that. You are 5'10". You are walking into grass that is taller than you. You cannot see your own livestock. You cannot see your own children. The Spanish explorer Coronado in 1541 called the prairie an ocean of grass, and that metaphor is not poetic. That is what it looked like.
What is under the grass?
Roots. Specifically, a root system that goes 7 to 15 feet straight down into the earth. A single square meter of prairie contains over 5 miles of root tissue. It is the most intricate underground architecture on the continent, and it has been accumulating for thousands of years, which is why the soil that is sitting on top of it is the richest agricultural soil on Earth. 3 feet of topsoil, eastern soil, say the soil John Deere grew up plowing in Vermont, 6 to 12 inches of topsoil.
So it should be an agricultural paradise.
It should be an agricultural paradise. And here's the problem. The eastern plow does not work on it. At all.
Why?
2 reasons. 1, the root mat is so dense and so deep that the standard plow, the wooden moldboard plow with the iron edge, physically cannot cut through it. To break virgin prairie side for the first time, you needed a special monstrous tool called a prairie breaker. The prairie breaker had a moldboard and a wrought iron share that by themselves, just those 2 parts, weighed at least 125 pounds. And to pull it, you needed 3 to 7 yoke of oxen. Yoke of oxen. We're talking about 6 to 14 large animals pulling one plow in tandem to cut a furrow that is 2 to 3 inches deep.
Holy hell.
And here is the kicker. A farmer with one of these things in one season of plowing considered himself fortunate to break 8 acres. 8 acres.
An acre is the size of a football field. So a season of brutal physical labor with 6 to 14 oxen breaks 8 football fields.
8 football fields. And if you did not own a prairie breaker, and most settlers did not because the things were absurdly expensive, you hired out the work to a custom breaking team. Standard rate, $2 to $5 per acre.
Which in $1836 is
A lot, a real lot. So problem number 1, cutting the sod the first time is brutal and slow.
what is problem number 2?
Problem number 2 is what happens after the sod is broken, because now you are plowing the actual prairie soil. And prairie soil is this thick, sticky black clay, and it sticks to the mold board of a cast iron plow. Cast iron, at the microscopic level, is porous and rough. The clay grips it. Friction. So every 15-20 feet, the farmer has to stop the plow, get down on his knees, and scrape the soil off the mold board with the wooden paddle. Then plow another 15 feet. Stop, scrape, plow, stop, scrape.
A 40-acre field would take you forever.
A 40-acre field would take you weeks. Now layer on top of that the rest of prairie life. The grass is so tall that newly arrived settlers from the east genuinely lost their minds. There is a real reported phenomenon from the 1830s and 1840s called prairie sick, or sometimes prairie madness. Settlers who would break down emotionally because the horizon was infinite. There is one anonymous settler's letter back to relatives in the East that just reads, and this is a real letter, quote, "Everything here is strange. The sky is too large. There are no hills to rest the eye. At night, stars fill the entire sky from horizon to horizon." End quote.
The sky is too large.
The sky is too large. Add to that, mosquitoes so thick they could suffocate livestock, malaria so endemic that Illinois had the nickname the Emporium of Malaria, a winter in 1830 to 1831, just a few years before Deere arrives, that became known as the Winter of the Deep Early Snow. Cattle froze where they stood. Settlers got stranded walking between neighboring houses.
So this is the situation. People are pouring into the Illinois prairies, 2.2 million of them in just the 1850s. 25% of all the population growth in the United States during that decade is going into Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, and Missouri. They have Eastern tools. The Eastern tools do not work. They are sick, they are isolated, and they are spending half their day on their knees scraping mud off iron.
And into that situation walks a 32-year-old blacksmith from Vermont with $73.73 in his pocket and a pregnant wife and 4 kids he has just left behind.
So who is this guy? Where does he come from? What kind of person are we dealing with?
Okay, don't worry about every detail in this section. What matters is the pattern. John Deere, as a founder, is not who you think he is. Forget the bronze statue. Forget the leaping deer. The real John Deere is, and I am going to quote Dahlstrom's description directly here, quote, 6 feet tall, with broad, muscular shoulders and, by some accounts, fiery red hair. The prototypical pioneer, rugged, intrepid, and headstrong, end quote. He works, again per the book, quote, from 4 in the morning until late into the night.
Big red-headed guy at the forge before dawn.
Big red-headed guy at the forge before dawn, and his entire early life is a tour of business failure.
Walk me through it.
Vermont. He is born February 7, 1804 in Rutland. Father William, the one who writes the Boston Harbor letter, disappears at sea when John is 4. Mother Sarah raises 6 kids alone as a seamstress. At 17, John gets apprenticed to a guy named Captain Benjamin Lawrence in a neighborhood of Middlebury, Vermont called Frog Hollow. Lawrence has 7 blacksmiths working under him. Deere's starting salary is $30 a year, plus room and board, going up by $5 each year.
$30 a year.
$30 a year. He completes the apprenticeship in 1825. He marries Demarius Lamb in January 1827. Demarius is the daughter of a prosperous farmer. She attended Emma Willard's School for Young Ladies, so he is marrying somewhat up.
Okay.
And then the failures start. 1827, he tries a partnership with a guy named John McVean in Virginis. Ends in a year. 1828, McVean partnership dissolves. 1829, he borrows money from a Stephen Sparks to set up shop at a crossroads called Four Corners in Leicester, Vermont. Briefly partners with a guy named Darius Holman, then becomes Holman's tenant. The shop burns down. Then it burns down again.
Twice, and at this point, most frontier blacksmiths in his cohort would have just walked away from the trade. He doesn't.
He doesn't. Common occupational hazard for blacksmiths. You are working a forge inside a timber frame building. 1830 to 1832, he is in Ruralton, Vermont, repairing stagecoaches for a guy named Amos Bosworth. 1833, he borrows money from a local doctor and builds yet another shop in Hancock, Vermont. February 1835, and this is the number that ends his Vermont life. He takes out a loan for $78.76.
$78.
$78. He cannot pay it back. In November 1836, the deputy sheriff of Leicester comes to find him and arrests him. He posts bail. The judge places a lien on his property. He sells the shop to his father-in-law for $200. He has a pregnant wife and 4 children. He turns and walks west.
The hot take is that John Deere did not migrate west to invent something. He migrated west to outrun a creditor.
That is exactly the hot take. He fled debt. Per Dahlstrom, quote, "There is no record of Deere's trip west. He spoke only of traveling by canal boats and lakes," end quote. Most likely route, Vermont, Erie Canal, Chicago, wagon overland to Grand Detour. He arrives in early to mid-December 1836. Friend of a friend has founded a town and needs a blacksmith. That friend is Leonard Andrus. We will get to him in a second. Observation. The customer development work that defines the rest of John Deere's career was forced on him by debt. He didn't go west to find a market, he went west to survive. The fact that he ended up surrounded by the most underserved farming customers in America was a side effect of him running away.
Take me to Grand Detour, December 1836. What is this place?
Grand Detour, Illinois. The name is literally French for Big Bend. Specifically, the Rock River, a tributary of the Mississippi, bends so dramatically here that it forms a horseshoe loop. The settlement sits inside the loop, so it is surrounded by water on 3 sides. Native peoples, Winnebago, Potawatomi, Sauk, Fox, had been in this region for centuries before settlement. There is a beautiful piece of indigenous mythology about that river band. The Sauk story is that the Rock River was, quote, so taken with itself and the beauty of the surrounding landscape that it doubled back to take another look, forming the great horseshoe bend that cradled Grand Detour.
That is a great line.
It is a beautiful line. By the time John Deere arrives, the indigenous peoples have been forcibly pushed out. The Black Hawk War ended in 1832, 4 years earlier. The town has a population of about 100 people. It was founded in 1833 by a man named Leonard Andrus.
Tell me about Andrus, because Andrus is going to matter, and Andrus is going to be the first major business breakup of John Deere's life.
Leonard Andrus is, at this point, 31 years old. Dahlstrom describes him as, quote, a thin, serious-minded widower whose mind was as sharp as his beak-shaped nose.
Beak-shaped nose.
The book's words, not mine. Originally from New York. May have actually attended Middlebury College. Deere may have been his classmate. He had set out for the Galena lead mines in Illinois. Galena was a lead boom town, and on the way got intercepted by a guy named John Dixon. Dixon convinced him to settle at this bend in the Rock River. Andrus claimed the land in 1833, bought a riverbank cabin from a French trapper in 1834, and built a hydraulic plant, basically a small dam and a mill complex powered by the river. Then a sawmill, then a flour mill. Then he wrangled the ferry rights, the stagecoach line, and, after a trip to Washington, the post office. By 1836, he is, more or less, the king of Grand Detour.
The town's only blacksmith just walked into town with $73 to his name. What happens?
Andrus immediately hires Deere for an emergency. The pitman shaft on the Pine Creek mill has broken. Deere fixes it within the first week before he has even built his own shop. Then he builds the shop. He builds it from local timber and rock. He builds a small house, 18 by 24 feet, 2 rooms downstairs, and upper sleeping room. Within days, he's accepting blacksmithing work from settlers in the area.
Okay, the 1837 plow story. This is the moment we have all been waiting for. Tell it the way Dahlstrom tells it.
Sometime in 1837, the exact date is not preserved, John Deere is making a service call at the Grand Detour hydraulic mill, which is owned by Andrus. And lying in the corner of the sawmill is a broken steel saw blade, long, curved, highly polished from years of cutting wood. Deere asks Andrus his permission to take it. Andrus says yes.
So far, so good.
Deere takes the blade back to his shop. Direct quote from Dahlstrom. Deere cut the teeth off the long blade with a hand chisel, striker, and sludge, then heated one small section at a time and molded it with a hammer. End quote. He shapes the steel into the curve of a mold board, attaches it to an iron base. He digs up a sapling, shaves 2 plow handles from it, connects them to a carved beam. He molds an upright standard from bar iron stock. He has now built a plow. He sets it on a dry goods box in front of his blacksmith shop.
And the crowds come running.
The crowds do not come running. Direct quote. It was several days before a farmer saw the plow and asked to give it a try.
Several days.
Several days. There was no eureka moment in front of an audience. There was a plow sitting on a dry goods box, and after several days, a curious farmer asked if he could try it. The farmer's name, per the surviving record, is Lewis Crandall. He takes it to his farm. The dirt slides off. The plow self-polishes as it cuts. He spreads the word. 2 neighbors place orders.
Okay, so that is the canonical story. Now, what is the part that until 2005 nobody talked about?
2 things. Thing 1 is a guy named John Lane. Lane is a blacksmith in Lockport, Illinois, about 90 miles east of Grand Detour, just outside Chicago. In 1831, 6 years before John Deere makes his plow, John Lane takes a steel sawmill blade, cuts it into strips, and nails the strips onto a wooden mold board. It is exactly the same idea Deere will execute 6 years later. Lane never patents it. Lane never industrializes it. He probably builds fewer than 500 plows in his entire life, all by hand, one at a time. But when Lane dies in 1857, Scientific American runs his obituary, and the obituary calls John Lane, quote, the inventor of the steel plow.
Wait, Scientific American, the publication of record in 1857, calls a different guy the inventor of the steel plow?
29 years before John Deere dies, a different guy who made his plow 6 years earlier than Deere did, 29 years before John Deere dies, and John Deere is alive, and John Deere never disputes it. Because, back to the Dahlstrom thesis, it is simply not important to his business.
Okay, what is thing 2?
Thing 2 is even more humbling. Back in 1828, 9 years before Grand Detour, while John Deere was still failing in Vermont, he worked for that blacksmith, John McVean, in Vergennes. Dahlstrom found a newspaper advertisement that McVean ran in 1826, the year before Deere joined him. The ad lists the products McVean's shop made, and it advertises horseshoes, axes, and other tools made, quote, from the best cast steel and English blister.
So, McVean was using cast steel for tools in Vermont before Deere even arrived to work for him?
McVean was using cast steel for tools in Vermont before Deere arrived to work for him. So when, 9 years later, Deere is standing in front of a broken steel sawmill blade in Andrus's mill and thinks, what if I made a plow out of this? He is not having a moment of original inspiration. He is reaching for a material technique he learned as a journeyman. Dahlstrom's exact words, quote, in this light, Deere's idea was likely less inspiration and more a marriage of experience and opportunity, end quote.
So, to restate, he didn't invent the steel plow. He didn't even have the original idea for using steel in a plow. He combined a Vermont blacksmith's material technique with an Illinois physics problem, and he was the first guy who methodically scaled the result. That is the founding story.
That is the founding story. He industrialized it.
Local farmers gave Deere's plows a nickname. They called it the singing plow for the slight whine it made as it cut through prairie soil. Price was as low as $7.
$7. And the production trajectory?
1839, 10 plows. 1840, 40 plows. That is also the year the census first lists Deere's occupation as agricultural manufacturer. Meaningful because it suggests he had stopped thinking of himself as a blacksmith. 1841, 75 plows. 1842, 100 plows.
Wait, I want to dwell on this. He has not yet hit 1,000 plows a year, and the legend already says he is famous. He spends 10 years between his first plow and being kind of medium famous in Illinois.
10 years, and during those 10 years, he is in court constantly trying to collect on bad debts. In one 4-year stretch in the early 1840s, he sues debtors in nearly 24 separate cases. There is a primary record of Deere suing a guy named Levi Dort in February 1841 for a 2-year-old debt of $14.56. There's a primary record of him winning a judgment against a guy named Peter Wirtz, who had bought one plow for $15 and still owed $10.62.
$10.62. He is suing for $10.62.
He is suing for $10.62. Dahlstrom's words. Deere would spend the next 20 years either trying to collect or facing the creditors who were trying to collect from him.
Okay, so by 1843, Deere is making about 100 plows a year. That is not enough to support him without other blacksmithing work. He needs capital, he needs scale. What does he do?
He partners with Andrus. March 20, 1843, they formally establish L. Andrus and Company. A year later, they add a third partner, Horace Payne. By 1846, the company has been renamed Andrus, Deere, and Lathrop. They build a small factory, they install a steam engine, they're running 8 to 10 employees on an average day. By 1846, they're producing 1,000 plows a year.
But the partnership does not last.
The partnership does not last. 2 reasons, and both of them tell you something about who John Deere is as a founder. Reason 1, Andrus opposes a proposed railroad that would run through Grand Detour. Deere is in favor of it.
Of course he is.
The whole time he is, because the railroad means you can ship plows to farmers in Iowa and Wisconsin and Missouri. Andrus's whole life is in Grand Detour. Andrus's mill, Andrus's ferry, Andrus's post office. Andrus is the town. Andrus doesn't need customers outside the town. Deere does. Reason 2, Deere wants to sell plows to customers who are not within walking distance of Grand Detour. Andrus wants to focus on the local market.
So the disagreement is fundamentally about distribution.
The disagreement is fundamentally about distribution. And this is the moment that finally tips it. In January 1848, a third child of John and Damaris dies. His name is Albert. He is in school. He gets sick. They rush him home. Flu epidemic going through Ogle County. Dahlstrom, Albert was the third of his children to die since the family had arrived in Grand Detour 10 years earlier.
The third child.
The third child. And the book directly attributes the move to Moline to this moment.
The decision that ends up making Deere the one to move to a town on the Mississippi River so he can put plows on barges is downstream of a child's death.
Downstream of a child's death, the personal and the business are completely inseparable in this story. So in 1848, Deere goes to look at locations. He takes with him a guy named Robert Tate, an English immigrant from North Shields who is a brilliant blacksmith and machinist. They head to Rock Island, Illinois. They meet with an entrepreneur. They cannot reach agreement on the price of water power.
So Rock Island falls through. They need a plan B before heading home empty-handed.
So they go to a local inn to sleep, and this is one of my favorite small stories in the entire Dahlstrom book. They are trying to sleep, and they are kept awake all night by what they think is a crying baby in the next room over. In the morning, they discover that, and I quote, the wailing infants were bear cubs belonging to one of the other boarders.
Bear cubs.
Bear cubs.
Frontier, Illinois.
Frontier, Illinois. The next day, instead of Rock Island, they meet a guy named Colonel John Buford, the patriarch of a Rock Island merchant family who owns water power rights in the village of Moline, 4 miles upriver. Colonel Buford's sons will 15 years later become Union generals. One of them, the West Point cadet John Buford the Younger, at this point in 1848, will open the Battle of Gettysburg by holding a ridgeline for the Union Army. But that is later. For now, Colonel Buford is just a Rock Island businessman with water power to sell. Buford gives Deere and Tate better terms. And Moline has one thing Grand Detour does not. It sits on the Mississippi River. Plows on barges, north to St. Paul, south to St. Louis, anywhere in the Mississippi watershed.
Andrus gets bought out.
Andrus offers Deere $1,200 for Deere's interest in the Grand Detour business. Deere quickly accepted. He never looked back.
Playbook moment number 1. The single most important strategic decision of the company's first 50 years is John Deere's willingness to break with his co-founder over distribution. Andrus has the brand of the town, Andrus has the political capital, Andrus has the post office. Deere walks away from all of it for a river. $1,200 buys his freedom. And that river, combined with the railroad that is about to arrive, is what turns a regional plow shop into a national plow company.
Moline. The name comes from the French word moulin, meaning mill. They called it the City of Mills. It is, in 1848, a 5-year-old town that was technically founded in 1843, but legally was not officially recognized until 1848 because a fire had destroyed its founding documents. So it is barely a place when Deere arrives.
Who joins Deere on the way over?
3 founders: Robert Tate, the English machinist, partner number 1; John Gould, a bookkeeper from New Hampshire, formerly educated, who joined despite having no cash. He paid for his stake with a future loan at 6% interest. And Charles Atkinson, the town founder of Moline. Don't worry about all 3 names. What matters is that the official partnership, Deere, Tate, and Gould, is signed June 19th, 1848.
And remember John Gould's name, actually, because he's going to come back in Act 2 in a way you will not expect.
Hold John Gould. 3 weeks after the partnership signs, on July 28, 1848, they raise the rafters on the first Moline plow factory, 60 feet by 24 feet. Robert Tate writes about this in his diary that day. His exact words, quote, "raised the rafters of the plow shop," end quote. 2 months later, on September 26, 1848, Tate writes in his diary again, "finished the first 10 plows." Exclamation point and everything.
Exclamation point and everything. And then, and this is the part that I think really shows you who John Deere is as an operator, they get into a conversation with one of the 2 existing local blacksmiths in Moline, a guy named Cyrus Kinsey. Kinsey wants to know how Deere plans to compete in a plow market that is already saturated with skilled manufacturers. Deere responds with a sentence that is essentially the volume over margin playbook 170 years before the internet. Direct quote, as Kinsey later remembered it. He did not care so much about a large profit, but by a smaller profit and the number he would make, he would be enabled to drive out competition.
Amazon in 1848.
Amazon in 1848. Lower margins, higher volume, drive out competitors. Then add, and this is the second piece of the strategy, premium materials at scale. Deere becomes the first plow company in the entire United States to systematically import steel from England, from the River Don works in Sheffield. And it works. Between October 1849 and October 1850, year 1 of the Moline business, the partnership sells more than 2,300 plows. By late 1851, they are making 70 plows a week, with $30,000 in accounts receivable. Tate writes to his brother, and this is going in my Texas Hold'em hand of best founder quotes, "Our business is lucrative, our factory one of the largest, if not quite the largest in the state. In short, our name is up, and I don't know why we should not do well."
Our name is up.
Our name is up. 1851.
But the Tate-Gould-Deere partnership does not last either. Why?
2 reasons. First, external. A St. Louis steel supplier called Leon Schorb and Company sends an agent to Moline to review the books in winter 1851. He sees $30,000 of receivables and demands immediate cash payment. Gould has to explain that the receivables are real, but the cash isn't yet collectible. The agent offers them an additional loan with mortgages and unpaid notes as collateral.
Sounds like a friendly offer.
Sounds like a friendly offer. Gould soon discovers the agent's true motive. The agent personally holds stock in Andrews's Grand Detour Plow Company, Deere's old company, now a competitor. The agent's plan was to lend Deere into a corner and then bankrupt the company on the loan so that Andrews's company could absorb the business. This is, in 1851, a hostile acquisition via supplier financing attempt. 200 years before private equity invents the leveraged buyout, somebody in St. Louis is trying it on John Deere.
And bless him, he sees through it.
He sees through it. But it spooks everyone. And it surfaces the second reason, the ideological split between Tate and Deere. Tate wants to keep making and selling the products they already have. Deere wants to constantly improve the design.
Their exact argument is preserved by Gould. Tate says, quote, "Damn the odds. They have got to take what we make," end quote. Deere replies, quote, "They haven't got to take what we make, and somebody else will beat us, and we will lose our trade."
The first time someone says, if we don't disrupt ourselves, someone else will.
1851, late 1851. Deere offers Gould $2,600 for his shares. Gould sells. Tate sells soon after. 4 years after moving to Moline, Deere is back to being a solo operator. He sets up a new partnership called Deere and Chapman in late 1854 with his son-in-law, James Chapman, a lawyer who closes his legal practice to come run the business side. February 22, 1854, the railroad reaches Rock Island, the town next door. Tate writes in his diary, "The cars, the railroad car, the train reaches Rock Island. Such a hubbub, yet they are all merry." 2 years after that, the railroad lays a bridge across the Mississippi. Now Deere can ship year-round by rail.
And the volume goes vertical.
8,000 plows in 1855, 10,000 in 1857. In January 1855, a local newspaper called the Rock Islander runs a headline in all caps. The headline is just 4 words: John Deere, the Plow King. Now, Sam, we have to spend serious time on the next part, because this is where the standard Charles Deere story we tell is wrong, or at least incomplete. Take it.
1857. America has just gone through the panic of 1857, a short, sharp financial collapse. Banks fail, credit dries up. Deere, like every plow manufacturer, has farmer paper outstanding that suddenly cannot be collected. The Mercantile Agency, which is the credit reporting bureau of the era, writes a report on Deere in late 1857. The report describes the company's financial position with the kind of bluntness that would make a modern lawyer faint. Quote, "Jay has sold out to C.C. Weber. Deere's debts want attention."
Who is C.C. Weber?
C.C. Weber is Charles Deere's brother-in-law, specifically Christopher Columbus Weber. Don't worry about the full name. What you need to know is Weber has just been admitted as a partner in Deere & Company. He is married to John Deere's daughter, Ellen. Weber had previously run a Rock Island iron foundry called the Union Foundry, which had been a supplier of castings to Deere. The Union Foundry had failed in the Panic of 1857, so C.C. Weber is, in 1858, a recently bankrupt brother-in-law who has just gotten himself made a partner in the family business.
That sounds like it is not going to go well.
That is not going to go well. The Mercantile Agency keeps writing reports through 1858 and 1859. Listen to what they say about C.C. Weber specifically. Quote, "Weber has some considerable property. His reputation as a businessman is decidedly bad, for though he may be responsible, he is not prompt to pay but prompt to collect. The general impression here is that he has worked himself into the plow factory for the purpose of making money, even at the sacrifice not only of Deere's reputation, but of Deere himself." End quote.
Weber has, in plain language, worked himself into the company to extract money from the founder.
Weber has, in plain language, worked himself into the company to extract money from the founder. The credit reports about John Deere himself in 1860 are even worse. Quote, "He is in very bad condition. Can't pay more than 35 to 45 cents on the dollar. Has a large amount of assets, but they are almost valueless. Can't pay what he owes at all. Much less can he buy anything." End quote.
John Deere himself, the famous plow king of 1855, in 1860 is on the verge of personal bankruptcy.
He is on the verge of personal bankruptcy, and his son Charles, 21 years old in 1858 when this starts, is the one who is going to have to either save the family business or watch it sink. October 5th, 1858, John Deere, under enormous financial pressure, including pressure from Weber, sells the entire company to Charles for $15,000. Charles pays for the company with promissory notes payable to his father over the next 11 years. Charles is 21 years old. He has been working at Deere since he was 16. He now legally owns the company.
A 21-year-old now owns the family business in the middle of a financial panic.
A 21-year-old now owns the family business in the middle of a financial panic, and the next 18 months are the hardest of his life. He has to buy out his brother-in-law, Weber, who is actively undermining the business. He has to keep his father from being publicly bankrupted. He has to collect from dealers all across Western Illinois who can't or won't pay. He has to convince steel suppliers to keep extending credit. He is, in plain language, holding the company together by force of will.
And in the middle of this, we have something incredible, because Charles Deere kept a personal memorandum book from 1858 through 1869. The book survives. The Deere archive has it. And the entries from 1858 to 1860, when Charles is 21 to 23 years old, fighting for the family business, are not what you would expect.
What are they?
They are unbelievably human. Charles is on the road, riding trains and stagecoaches all over Western Illinois, collecting from dealers. And in between entries about sales calls and bad debts and unpaid notes, he writes things like, and these are verbatim from the memorandum, "Got a red dog pup, W.H. Towner, Augusta, Illinois. Dog was recommended by J. Hall, station agent at Augusta. Dog was about 2 months old when I got him."
Charles Deere bought a puppy in the middle of saving the family business.
He bought a puppy in the middle of saving the family business. A few months later, Inquirer of J. Park wants to train my pup in June. A few entries later, get measured for shirts. J.P. James under Fremont in Lake Street. Shirts for all weather. He is in the middle of saving the family from bankruptcy, and he is also keeping track of the dog trainer and getting measured for shirts.
Picture him. He is 22 years old. He is sitting on a steam train in central Illinois. He has a list of dealers who owe his father money and might be about to flee the state. He has a brother-in-law back in Moline who is actively trying to extract money from the family. His father's credit reports are describing him as in very bad condition. And in his memo book, Charles also has a list of books he wants to read.
Read the books.
He wants, quote, to write Griggs & Co., Chicago, for Landers, Analysis of English Words. Book Get It, Self-Help by Samuel Smiles. Gold Foil by Timothy Titcomb. Homes in the New World, Frederica Bremer. Get Books, The Genuine Woman by Mitch Dett. The Habits of Good Society, end quote. The kid is 22, fighting for the family business, and he is bringing self-help books on his sales trips.
Bezos in 1859.
Bezos in 1859, and in the middle of all this, in his memorandum book, on a single page set apart from everything else, dated February 7th, 1860, Charles Deere writes the line that is going to become, 72 years later, the founding moral commitment of the entire Wickard 1932 decision. The line on this page is signed, personally, by Charles. It is one sentence. Listen.
I will never from this 7th day of February 1860 A.D. put my name to a paper that I do not expect to pay. So help me God.
That is the line.
That is the line. February 7th, 1860 is his father's 56th birthday. The line is, in form, a personal vow. In context, it is a moral commitment to never be the kind of businessman his brother-in-law C.C. Weber has been, to never sign a note he cannot honor, to never extract value at the expense of the people who trust him. And in 72 years, his great-grandson, Charles Deere Wiman, is going to make a decision in a Moline boardroom to carry American farmers through the Great Depression, even at the cost of millions of dollars in losses. That is, in moral logic, the exact mirror of that vow.
Plant the vow. It is the most important sentence in this whole episode. Payoff in Act 2.
Plant it. And by November 1860, Charles has bought out Weber, stabilized the company's finances, and convinced his father to let him formally run Deere & Company. John Deere reorganizes the company once more to give Charles full leadership. They rename it the Moline Plow Manufactory. Note what is missing: John Deere's name. For the first time in more than 2 decades, the company does not have John Deere's name on the door.
Which is wild, because 40 years later, after John has died, the company's catalogs will be flooded with the John Deere brand. Charles is going to spend the next 40 years rebuilding the legend of his father. And the most important thing the son will do is convince the world that the father invented something that the father, by his own account, never claimed to have invented.
We are going to close the act with John Deere's actual death. Not the legend, the actual death. Take it.
Take it. By the early 1880s, John Deere is in his late 70s. He has, for the previous 15 years, been mostly retired from day-to-day operations of the company. Charles runs it. John still comes in. He inspects the factory. He drinks with the workers. He gives speeches. He is, and this is the right word, beloved.
How beloved?
In February 1882, John's 78th birthday, Charles and the entire executive force of Deere & Company sneak through downtown Moline, in line of battle, up the Central Avenue Hill to Redcliffe, John's mansion on the bluff. They surprise him at his front door. Quote from a local reporter who witnessed it, quote, completely taken by surprise, the old gentleman surrendered at discretion.
His own executives line up like a marching regiment to attack his birthday.
His own executives line up like a marching regiment to attack his birthday. There is another anecdote from the same period. John travels to Grand Tour, the town he founded the company in, for a meeting of the Ogle County Old Settlers Association. He and another early settler, a man named John Gale, sit down in a local tavern. They become, quote, rather boisterous. The landlord tries to intervene. The landlord ends up taking refuge behind a barrel of salt fish. The two Johns each pick up a salt fish, and every time the landlord raises his head, they smack him with the fish.
Two old men named John in a tavern in 1880-something Illinois slapping the landlord with saltfish.
Burton Peake, who is going to be a future president of Deere & Company, was a witness and wrote it down, word for word. The two Johns, each with a saltfish, stood over him, and every time he raised his head, they smacked him. That was John Deere, at 78 years old.
Beat! That is a perfect anecdote.
It is a perfect anecdote. By 1885, his health is failing. His daughters, Jeanette and Ellen, take him to California that fall. There is a Deere nephew in Riverside, a pastor named George Deere at All Souls Universalist Church. George writes back to Charles a few months later. Listen to the description. Quote, Uncle is evidently in a state of senile imbecility. He is suffering from the weakness of age. End quote.
The founder of the company in 1885 is fading.
The founder of the company in 1885 is fading. He returns to Moline in February 1886. The local Daily Republican reports, quote, he looked many years older than when he left and was apparently badly used up. End quote.
And then?
And then, the first week of May 1886, the United States goes into the most intense labor crisis in its 19th century history. May 1st is the National Strike Day for an 8-hour workday. The Knights of Labor have been organizing nationally. Cyrus McCormick II's Reaper factory in Chicago is the strike epicenter. Deere's own grinders in Moline have joined the May 1st strike.
Deere is having a strike.
Deere is having a strike. May 3rd, 1886, a riot at the McCormick Reaper Works in Chicago. 1 striker dead. May 4th, 1886, the Haymarket Square bombing. A bomb thrown at police during a meeting at Haymarket Square in Chicago kills Officer Matthias Dagan instantly. 7 other officers fatally wounded, 60 more people injured, 8 anarchists arrested, 4 eventually hanged in November 1887.
This is one of the worst labor catastrophes in American history.
One of the worst labor catastrophes in American history. And it is happening, geographically, 170 miles east of John Deere's bed at Redcliffe. May 5th, 1886, the day after the Haymarket bombing, Gilpin Moore, Deere's superintendent of all manufacturing, settles the Deere grinders' strike. Quietly, the very next morning. Specifically, and this is per Dahlstrom, to prevent the kind of Chicago violence from happening at Deere.
Gilpin Moore saved Moline from being Haymarket.
Gilpin Moore saved Moline from being Haymarket. And then, 13 days later, mid-May 1886,
John Deere's health collapses. Charles, who has been on business in Colorado, gets the telegram and boards the next train east. He travels for 2 days. In the early evening of May 17, 1886, John Deere falls into an unrecoverable sleep at Red Cliff. Charles arrives the next morning. Too late to say goodbye.
Pause on that. John Deere dies at age 82 in his own home on the bluffs overlooking Moline, with his daughters, Jeanette and Ellen, at his bedside, with his son Charles still on a train somewhere between Colorado and Illinois.
Charles arrives too late to say goodbye. The Chicago Tribune headline the next morning, Mr. John Deere is dead.
And here is the part that I want listeners to take with them. Because we've been telling the John Deere story across 2 episodes now, as if the family always claimed he had invented the steel plow. He didn't claim it. And neither did the company. In May 1886, Deere & Company sends out the simple bifold funeral announcement of his death. Trimmed in black, printed on heavy stock, the only accolade on the announcement is John Deere's title. The title is Founder and President of Deere & Company's Moline Plow Works. End quote.
Not inventor of the steel plow.
Not inventor of the steel plow. Even in death. In the company's own death notice in 1886, the company did not make that claim. The inventor epitaph in the company catalogs comes later. Charles adds it after his father's death, and the board doesn't change it back until 1913.
27 years of brand engineering by the son.
27 years of brand engineering by the son. The funeral procession was on May 20th, 1886. From Red Cliff at 8 in the morning, through downtown Moline, to the First Congregational Church at 5th Avenue and 17th Street. The streets were lined. 4,000 people paid their respects. Stillman Wheelock, the Moline Plow Company chairman, Deere's main local competitor, served as honorary pallbearer. The old rivalries set aside for the funeral.
The competitor served as pallbearer.
The competitor served as pallbearer. And then 27 years pass. And in 1913, the board of directors of Deere & Company, under Charles's son-in-law, William Butterworth, who is now president, quietly meets. They make one change to the standard catalog. They strike the words inventor of the steel plow from underneath John Deere's portrait, and they replace it with the words, he gave to the world the steel plow.
Inventor out, he gave to the world in.
Inventor out, he gave to the world in. The board knew. By 1913, somebody at Deere & Company knew exactly what the historical record said. So they did the most graceful corporate edit in American business history. They didn't deny the legend, they just softened the verb. Inventor implies origination. Gave to the world implies distribution. And distribution is exactly what John Deere did do.
He industrialized it.
He industrialized. Closing of Act 1. John Deere is not the inventor of the steel plow. He is the inventor of the playbook for selling steel plows, the premium English steel from Sheffield, the volume over margin pricing, the willingness to break with co-founders for the sake of a river, the branch house dealer network that his son Charles will build out starting next year in 1869 in Kansas City, the relentless redesign, the willingness to spend a 56-year-old founder's birthday taking a vow about debt, and the masterstroke that arguably matters most, the choice of an heir who understood that a great founder needs a great legend, and who would spend the next 40 years building one.
Open loop number 1 for Act 2, the Charles Deere Journal Pledge of February 7, 1860. The I will never put my name to a paper that I do not expect to pay line. We will come back to it. Specifically, 72 years later, in a Moline boardroom, when Charles Deere Wiman, the great-grandson of John Deere, has to decide what to do about every farmer in America who can't pay their tractor note.
Open loop number 2, the branch house, Kansas City, 1869.
Charles starts a distribution network that 50 years later will be the moat that defeats Henry Ford. The Fordson tractor will sell in 1922 for $395. The Deere tractor will sell for $890, and the Deere will win because the channel is the moat.
Open loop number 3, the apple green paint. John Deere and an engineer named Melvin Gold designed the leaping deer trademark in the 1870s. A few decades later, a great-grandson of John Deere named George Mixter will adjust the corporate green, making it brighter and darker at the same time. The iconic John Deere green you recognize today, every tractor at every county fair, that color comes from a Mixter paint argument in the early 1900s.
Open loop number 4. Charles tried in 1898 and again in 1901 to merge the entire American plow industry under his presidency. He failed. We will tell that story in Act 2.
Open loops, 4 of them. See you after the break.
After the break, Act 2. John Deere becomes a national company and then almost dies. Twice. See you after the break.
It is August 22nd, 1907.
We are on the upper deck of a houseboat docked at Campbell's Island, a small wooded island in the Mississippi River 3 miles upstream from Moline, Illinois. 2 old men are sitting in cane chairs on the deck. The first is 70 years old. He is painfully thin. He has been bedridden in Chicago hospitals for most of the spring. He has been diagnosed with a blood disease called pernicious anemia. His wife is paralyzed, has been since November 1904. His older daughter died last June at the age of 42. His name is Charles Deere.
And the other man?
The other man is his cousin and business associate of 60 years, a man named George Vinton. Vinton has come to the houseboat for one reason. He is going to try to persuade Charles to retire.
The exact conversation that follows is preserved in Deere & Company's archives. Charles is very weak and nervous, Vinton later reported. The two of them talk about old times, and then they walk to the back of the boat, and Vinton says to him plainly, "Charlie, you pretty sick."
And Charles says,
"George, I'm sick forever. I ought to quit business 12 years ago."
That line is the one that the corporate archivist of Deere & Company would use 98 years later as the title of the final chapter of his official biography of the family, Sick Forever. And the line is not about his death.
It is not about his death. He is going to die 9 weeks from this moment in a Chicago hotel room. But the line is not about the dying. The line is about a specific 12-year period of his life. He is saying the last 12 years are the part I should not have lived through. 12 years before August 1907 is August 1895.
And what happened in 1895?
His closest friend died, a man named Stephen Veely, Charles's brother-in-law, his most trusted advisor of 25 years. Veely had bid Charles good night on the evening of February 14, 1895. They were planning to have breakfast the next morning before Veely left for a short vacation in California. And Veely died in his sleep that night.
Dwell on that. Picture the morning. Charles arrives at his friend's house expecting to share breakfast. And the friend is gone.
The friend is gone, and the work of the next 12 years is what Charles is saying killed him. Not the running of Deere & Company, the thing he tried to do during those years with the company,
The thing almost nobody outside of Deere knows he tried to do, because he failed at it.
Welcome to Act 2. Today we tell the story of the 4 worst near deaths in Deere & Company's first century, not the one. We tell the story of how Charles Deere, the son of the founder, spent the last 12 years of his life trying to consolidate the entire American agricultural implement industry into a single trust under his presidency. We tell the story of how a small Iowa company called Waterloo Boy saved Deere from being killed by Henry Ford. We tell the story of the federal government coming after the company for the first time. And we tell the story of a 40-year-old great-grandson of John Deere in a Moline boardroom in 1932, making 3 decisions in a single year that would define the company for the next 90. I'm Sam.
I'm Alex, and this is John Deere, Act 2.
Signpost for the listener. Act 2 covers the 70 years from 1886, the year John Deere died, to 1955, when William Hewitt takes over as the new CEO. That is too long to cover in detail, so we're going to focus on 4 moments.
4 moments.
Moment 1, the Plow Trust, Charles Deere's 2 attempts to consolidate the American implement industry. Almost nobody outside agricultural history knows this story. We start here.
Moment 2, the Fordson. Henry Ford launches the Fordson tractor in 1917 and tries to do to agriculture what he did to the carriage. Deere comes within 6 months of being a horse-drawn equipment company facing extinction.
Moment 3, the 1920-21 business debacle, a post-war collapse so severe that General Motors itself loses $33 million on its tractor venture and shuts the entire division. Deere nearly goes with them. And in the middle of it, the federal government opens its first major investigation of the industry.
Moment 4, the Wiman decision, 1932. Charles Deere's great-grandson, 40 years old, 4 years into his job as CEO, makes not 1, but 3 accounting decisions in a single year. Each of them would have been radical on its own. Together, they save the company. And they define the brand for the next 90 years.
Don't try to keep all the names. There will be a lot of them in this act. Just remember those 4 moments. Plow Trust, Fordson, 1920 debacle, Wiman.
And 1 open loop from Act 1, which is going to pay off in this act. Remember the journal pledge.
I will never, from this 7th day of February, 1860 AD, put my name to a paper that I do not expect to pay, so help me God.
That line is going to come back. About 2/3 of the way through this act. Hold it in the back of your mind. Okay, Plow Trust.
Alex, let me take the next section, because this is the part of the story I am most excited to tell. Hand me the floor.
It is yours.
It is 1886. John Deere has just died in Moline. Charles Deere, age 49, is officially named the 2nd president of Deere & Company on July 17th. But he has been running the company in practice for 30 years, so this is not really a succession. The succession happened in 1858, when Charles was 21. This is just the title catching up to the reality.
What has changed?
What has changed is the country. In the 20 years between 1865 and 1885, the United States has gone through one of the fastest industrial consolidations in human history. Railroads have merged into transcontinental systems. Andrew Carnegie has built U.S. Steel out of dozens of independent steel mills. John D. Rockefeller has built Standard Oil out of 22 of the 26 oil refineries in Cleveland. By 1882, Rockefeller's Standard Oil Trust is capitalized at $70 million. And the model, combining many smaller competitors into one giant corporation, is becoming the standard playbook for American industry.
And Charles is watching this.
And Charles is watching this. He runs a plow company that is by 1888 the second largest in the country. The largest is McCormick Harvester. In agriculture, there is no equivalent of Standard Oil. There are still over 2,000 plow manufacturers in the United States. Even after the consolidations of the 1860s and 1870s eliminated about 200 small firms. 2,000. And Charles thinks that is too many. Manufacturers are competing each other into bankruptcy. Prices are slipping, quality is slipping. The farmers are getting cheap equipment that breaks. Someone needs to consolidate the industry. And Charles starts to think, maybe that someone is me. A plow trust. A plow trust. And what follows over the next 13 years is two separate, increasingly ambitious attempts by Charles Deere to do for plows what Rockefeller did for oil. Both attempts fail, and the way they fail is the most important part of the whole John Deere story.
Take me through it.
The first attempt begins in 1889. An investment broker from Kansas City named F.L. Underwood contacts Deere on behalf of a group of British capitalists. The British have, in the 1880s, become enraptured with American trust building. They're flooding the American market with capital, looking for industries to roll up. Underwood proposes, let us combine Deere and Company, the Deere and Manser Company, which makes corn planters, and the Moline Plow Company, which is Deere's main local rival. 3 companies, 1 new entity. Combined assets around $2.8 million. The British group will finance it. Charles is interested. Stephen Veely, Charles's closest confidant, the brother-in-law I mentioned a moment ago, the one who is going to die in 1895, is skeptical. Veely is sent to Europe to investigate the financial soundness of the British investors. He travels through Paris and London for 3 months in late 1889. He sends back letters that, today, we have in the Deere archive verbatim. He writes, and I am going to read this slowly because it is the most important paragraph in the entire Deere family business philosophy.
Read it.
Quote, although a purely industrial institution, it has its moral and politico-economic aspects and an influence commensurate with its varied and widespread connections in associations. And I cannot help but regard its managers, whoever they are for the time being, as trustees charged with the duty and under obligations to so manage its affairs as to transmit its standing and character unimpaired to posterity. End quote.
Stephen Veely, 1890.
Stephen Veely, 1890. Veely is saying, the people who run this company are not its owners, they are its trustees. We hold it for the next generation. Charles reads that letter, and he keeps going with the merger anyway. On July 16, 1890, at 9:30 in the morning, the Deere & Company Board of Directors meets in Moline to vote on the sale of the 3 companies for $3 million. The board recommends the sale to the stockholders.
They are going to sell.
They are going to sell. And then the London Depression hits. Fall of 1890, Underwood writes Charles, nothing can be done with the business before the 1st of December because of the terrible depression. Then January 1892, the chairman of the Moline Plow Company, a man named Stillman Wheelock, dies suddenly. Other shareholders of Moline Plow, led by a guy named Andrew Freiberg, vote against the merger. By the summer of 1892, the first Plow Trust attempt is dead. Charles backs off. Charles backs off for 7 years. He turns his attention to other things. His daughter Anna marries William Wiman, the heir to the Wiman-Staten Island Railroad fortune, in October 1890, and they have a son who they name Charles Deere Wiman in early 1892. Remember that name? He is going to matter enormously later in this act. Catherine Deere marries William Butterworth, a young lawyer from Ohio, in June 1892. Butterworth joins Deere & Company. He is going to be the next president of the company.
So the family is consolidating internally as the industry consolidation falls apart.
The family is consolidating internally, and then, beginning in 1895, the people who built Deere alongside Charles start dying. February 14, 1895, Stephen Veely, the closest confidant, dies in his sleep. 1898, Alva Manser, Charles's old partner in Kansas City branch, dies. 1900, Gilpin Moore, the engineer who invented the Gilpin sulky plow, dies.
Charles is now 63 years old. His closest advisors are gone. He himself has been suffering from extreme stomach cramps since 1891. Doctors will eventually diagnose pernicious anemia, but they don't know it yet. And in May 1899, he tries the Plow Trust again.
Take two.
Take two, this time bigger. The New York Times breaks the story in March 1899, a proposed combination of great extent. $60 million in capitalization, then 65. 20 plow companies. Then, April 1901, Farm Implement News reports the deal is practically assured. Capitalization now $75 million. The combined entity will be called either United States Plow Company, American Plow Company, or American Plow and Implement Company. Headquarters in Moline, Charles Deere as president. He is going to be the president of the Consolidated American Plow Industry. He is going to be the president of the Consolidated American Plow Industry. And this is not a sleepy detail in Charles Deere's life. This is what he's working on full-time in his final years. He's 64 years old, he has pernicious anemia, he is in pain, and he is trying to build the agricultural equivalent of Standard Oil.
Sam, I want to push back on something here.
Push.
We have been telling the entire John Deere story across 2 acts now, as if the moral compass of the company, Stephen Bailey's letter, John Deere's modest approach, Charles Deere's 1860 journal pledge, was always the thing that kept Deere independent. You are now telling me that Charles Deere himself, the son of the founder, spent the last decade of his life trying to do exactly the thing we have been saying the family stood against. So which is it? Is the moral identity real, or were they just opportunists who got lucky that the trust failed?
That is a fair pushback, and the honest answer is both. Charles was an ambitious empire builder who genuinely believed consolidation was good for the industry and good for the farmer. He was not a hypocrite, he had a real economic argument. 2,000 plow manufacturers competing each other into the ground was producing worse plows, not better. He thought a coordinated industry would mean better quality at lower cost. That is what he said publicly. That is what the Farm Implement News editorial argued. That was his view.
But
the trust failed. And the reason it failed is what makes the family business story actually true. It failed because the Moline Plow Company refused to join, because Oliver Childplow refused, because J.I. Case refused, because farmer associations all over the country were hostile, because newspapers started writing about Deere as a potential robber baron, because Charles's own people, including his nephew C.C. Weber, wrote him angry letters telling him not to do it. It failed because the same family business culture that the company had built over 50 years made it impossible for Charles to convince 20 independent farm equipment manufacturers to surrender their independence to him. The culture stopped Charles from succeeding at the trust, even though Charles himself wanted to succeed at the trust.
So the company's values were stronger than its founder's son.
The company's values were stronger than its founder's son. And here is the line from Dahlstrom, the corporate archivist, that I think is the most important sentence in this entire act. Quote, Charles Deere's greatest failure, his failure to create what would have been one of the nation's largest trusts, was actually the greatest testament to the vision he and his father shared. It was his adherence to a belief in cooperative partnership, not a ruthless destruction of competitors, that prevented the consolidation of the trust. End quote.
his failure was his triumph.
His failure was his triumph. The deal collapses on July 1st, 1901, when the New York bankers fail to make a $500,000 deposit toward the Moline Plow Company stake. Charles meets with the bankers in New York. He returns to Moline on July 2nd. He confirms the collapse. He points to labor unrest as the cause. But what he doesn't say publicly, what his nephew, C.C. Weber, had written him in a letter on June 20th, 11 days before the deadline, was the real story. Weber had warned, quote, "Don't let it go that way. It will be a great mistake." Weber and the other branch managers had decided, behind Charles's back, that they would not support the trust.
His own family blocked him.
His own family blocked him. And 5 years later, on August 22nd, 1907, on a houseboat at Campbell's Island, Charles tells George Vinton, quote, "I'm sick forever. I ought to have quit business 12 years ago. 12 years from 1895, the year Stephen Bailey died, and the year Charles started planning the second trust attempt, to 1907. Charles is saying on his deathbed bridge, "The last 12 years of trying to build the empire have killed me, and I failed."
That is one of the saddest verdicts on a life I have ever heard.
It is one of the saddest verdicts on a life I have ever heard. He dies October 29th, 1907 at 1 a.m. in the Hotel Lakota in Chicago, where his wife, Mary, has been at his bedside for 23 days. Malim closes by mayoral proclamation for his funeral, same as it had 21 years earlier for John Deere.
William Butterworth becomes the third president of Deere & Company on Charles's death. He is 43 years old. He has been at the company 15 years. He is, and this is important to say plainly, not particularly well respected by the industry analysts of the era.
In what way?
In 1910, 3 years into his presidency, the U.S. Bureau of Corporations issues a major study of International Harvester. The study includes a brief assessment of Deere & Company. It says, and I quote, "It appears that the organization is somewhat unfortunate in that the present president of Deere & Company, William Butterworth, is new to the business. Mr. Butterworth, who is by profession a lawyer, was elected president on the death of Charles Deere about a year ago because of his relation to the latter's estate as his son-in-law. Competent outside authority considers that the Deere organization is much weakened by Mr. Butterworth's lack of experience." End quote.
A federal government report calls the new president much weakened by lack of experience?
A federal government report calls the new president much weakened by lack of experience. And the same report notes that there is, quote, "more or less dissension between those stockholders whose special interest was the plow business and those more directly concerned with other lines of manufacture."
So the company that Charles Deere held together by force of personality is, in 1908 and 1909 and 1910, kind of falling apart.
It's kind of falling apart. And the actual operational leader of the company during this period, the man who keeps the manufacturing running while Butterworth is learning his job, is someone we have not mentioned. His name is George Mixter. Don't worry about the name, listener. You don't have to remember George Mixter. What you have to remember is the role he plays.
What you have to remember is the role he plays. Mixter is a great-grandson of John Deere. He went to Yale's Sheffield Scientific School, the same school Charles Deere Wiman, the future CEO, will attend 20 years later. He joined Deere in 1896 at the age of 20. By 1904, he is the superintendent of all manufacturing in the company. By the time Butterworth becomes president in 1907, Mixter is the unchallenged voice of the factory floor.
And what does Mixter actually do? He builds the modern cost accounting system of the company. In the late 1890s, Deere, like most American manufacturers, did not really know what its products cost to make. Mixter takes a pamphlet from the Stove Manufacturing Association. Yes, the stove industry was ahead of the plow industry on this, and uses it to design Deere's first comprehensive ledger system. He builds the company's modern wage rate structure, including the first systematic piece rate compensation. He runs the famous fight with C.C. Weber about the quality of the apple green paint. Weber thought the green had become too delicate. Mixter wrote back saying he would make the green brighter and darker at the same time, which is mechanically impossible, but somehow he did it. That is the John Deere green you know today.
A great-grandson of the founder, who you have never heard of, designed the iconic green color of every John Deere tractor you have ever seen.
A great-grandson of the founder, who almost no one outside of corporate Deere has ever heard of, designed the iconic green color of every John Deere tractor you have ever seen. Mixter is also the executive who, in 1910, fights to keep Deere independent from two separate proposed mergers.
Two separate proposed mergers in 1910.
The first is with J.I. Case Company. Talks proceed for several months and then collapse over valuation. The second, and this one is wilder, is with International Harvester. Cyrus McCormick and William Butterworth have a series of meetings in 1910 about Deere and IH combining operations, including a proposal to coordinate Canadian manufacturing.
International Harvester wanted to absorb Deere.
International Harvester wanted to absorb Deere, and the deal nearly happened. It was killed primarily by antitrust concerns. The federal government's first antitrust action against International Harvester was filed in 1912, but also by Deere's branch house managers, who again refused to cooperate.
This is the second time in 20 years that Deere's branch house managers have killed a merger their own president supported. First the Plow Trust under Charles, now the IH merger under Butterworth. The branch houses, the ones Charles Deere set up in 1869, starting with Kansas City, are functionally a check on the central office's appetite for consolidation.
They are. The distribution network is more conservative than the head office, which is structurally what saves the company from becoming a subsidiary of IH.
Charles Deere built the Blanch House system in 1869 to extend Deere's reach. It is now, in 1910, the thing preventing his successor from selling Deere to IH.
It is. By 1912, Deere has acquired 10 other companies and consolidated all of them under a central accounting and finance office. This is the modern Deere and Company. 11 factories, 25 sales organizations, all running under unified management. Butterworth's quiet contribution to the company turns out to be substantial. He is not Charles, but he is in his cautious, lawyerly way the man who finally builds the corporate skeleton Charles spent his last 15 years trying to build through merger.
And then in 1917, the Fordson lands.
And then in 1917, the Fordson lands. Sam, take the Fordson.
I will take the Fordson. Henry Ford grew up on a farm in Michigan in the 1870s. He hated farming. Specifically, he hated the backbreaking labor of horse-drawn agriculture. He spent his entire adult life building machines that would eliminate animal labor. The Model T eliminated the horse-drawn carriage. The next target was the horse-drawn plow.
And the timing matters.
The timing matters. In 1908, Ford ships the Model T. By 1913, he installs the moving assembly line at Highland Park. By 1917, he has driven the price of a Model T from $825 at launch to under $500. He has demonstrated repeatedly that mass production can collapse the price of mechanical things by 60 to 70%. October 8th, 1917, he turns the same technique on the tractor.
The Fordson.
The Fordson. Launches at, now I want to do this carefully because the price progression is the whole story. Launches at $750.
$750.
For context, the next cheapest competing tractor on the American market that year was around $1,500. Ford has just cut the price of a tractor in half overnight, and the cuts keep coming. 1921, Ford drops the Fordson to $620. 1922, Ford cuts again to $395.
$395.
By 1923, Fordson has 75% of all U.S. tractor sales. 75%. By the time Ford eventually exits the tractor business in 1928, more than 744,000 Fordsons have been produced.
Where is Deere in 1917 when the Fordson launches?
Deere does not have a tractor.
Deere does not have a tractor.
Deere has a prototype, the Dane all-wheel drive, designed by an engineer named Joseph Dane Sr. 3 years of work, all-wheel drive, 3 drive wheels, gear-driven water pump, key ignition, on-the-go shifting. By the standards of 1917, it is technologically remarkable. There is one problem. Each Dane cost around $1,700 to build. Deere prices them at $1,500, already losing money on every unit. And the Fordson will be selling for $395 within 5 years.
Deere is selling a $1,500 tractor against a $395 tractor.
The math does not work. Deere builds exactly 100 Dane tractors in 1918, then quietly kills the program. The story would have been even sadder, except for one thing. Joseph Dane himself died in late 1917 before the first 100 Dane tractors shipped. He never saw his project fail. He also was not around to argue for a second iteration, which made it easier for the Deere board to abandon the in-house program.
That is a haunting detail.
It is the saddest engineering footnote in the company's history. And then there was the Valley tractor.
Wait, there were 2 failed in-house tractors?
There were 2 failed in-house tractors. Willard Valley, son of Stephen Valley, who is the closest confidant we talked about earlier. Willard ran his own separate Valley carriage company in Moline, and he had been building his own tractor in parallel to Dane's. The Valley built well, same idea, different team, same fate.
So Deere is in early 1918 with no in-house tractor program, no shippable product, and Henry Ford about to obliterate the market.
The Deere board has weeks, not years, and so on March 14th, 1918, they do the most important acquisition in the history of the company. They acquired the Waterloo Gasoline Engine Company.
$2,350,000 in cash, a tractor, an engineering team, a factory, and dealer relationships all in one transaction.
Sam, give the listener the John Froelich callback.
I will. The Waterley Gosling Engine Company was founded in 1893 by a man named John Froelich, a grain dealer and tinkerer in Waterloo, Iowa. In 1892, the same year, Carl Benz was selling the first commercial gasoline automobile in Germany. Froelich attached a gasoline engine to a wheeled chassis and used it to power a threshing crew. It worked. He founded the company. They built 4 tractors that year. They sold 2. Both got returned. The company nearly died. They pivoted to stationary engines. 20 years later, in 1914, they tried tractors again, this time with kerosene fuel. They called it the Waterloo Boy. By 1917, the Waterloo Boy was the best-selling non-Fordson tractor in America, roughly 8,000 units sold over the next decade.
And it is a shippable, manufacturable tractor sitting in a factory in Iowa when Deere needs one.
Which is exactly what Deere is shopping for. March 14th, 1918, board votes unanimously, $2.33 million. Deere now has a tractor.
And here is the callback to Act 1.
Here's the callback. In Act 1, we talked about John Deere's plow. The story we told was that John Deere didn't invent the steel plow. A guy named John Lane in Lockport, Illinois, built a steel-bladed plow in 1831, 6 years before John Deere did. Deere didn't invent the plow. He industrialized somebody else's idea. He took it, paid for it, painted it green and yellow, and shipped it through a dealer network.
That is the playbook.
That is the playbook, and in 1918, 81 years later, Deere does this same thing again. They didn't invent the tractor, John Froelich did, or more honestly, Carl Benz and John Froelich did, separately in 1892. Deere bought the tractor. They painted it green and yellow, they put the leaping deer on it in 1920, they shipped it through the Charles Deere branch house network. Same playbook, 81 years apart.
He industrialized it.
He industrialized it. And then the Fordson and the Waterloo Boy went to war for the American tractor market, and for 4 years, from 1920 to 1924, it looked like Deere was going to lose.
The price war is the part of this story most people who have heard of Deere don't know. Let me set the macro for a minute.
Set it.
In 1920, World War I ends. The American agricultural economy collapses. Wholesale prices fall from an index of 148 to 88 in 2 years, a 40-point drop. Farmers' return on investment goes from 11% in 1918 to 2.88% by 1920. Farm bankruptcies, and listen to this, go from 18.8 bankruptcies per 100,000 farms in 1918 to 50.3 by 1921, to 123 by 1924.
A 7-fold increase in farm bankruptcies in 6 years.
A 7-fold increase, and for the first time in the history of the United States, the first time, cropping acreage begins to decline. Starting 1919, by 1924, 13 million acres of formerly cultivated land have reverted to grass, scrub brush, and woodland. American agriculture had been growing continuously for 250 years, and in 1919 it starts to shrink.
Hold that for a second. Picture an Iowa farmer in 1921. He has just borrowed against his land to buy a Fordson tractor. Henry Ford has just dropped the price to $3.95. The farmer's wheat is selling for 60 cents a bushel. The price he was getting in 1916 was $2. His interest payments are unchanged. His income is collapsing, and he is going to lose the farm.
And every farm equipment manufacturer is selling fewer and fewer tractors.
And every farm equipment manufacturer is selling fewer and fewer tractors. By 1922, the wave of bankruptcies in the implement industry is staggering. Listen to just the names of the companies that went under in the 2 years 1921 and 1922.
Read them.
The Farm Horse Traction Works of Gutenberg, Iowa, gone. The Bulldog Tractor Company of Oshkosh, Wisconsin, gone. The Bull Tractor Company of Minneapolis, gone. The Wolverine Tractor Company of Detroit, gone. The Illinois Tractor Company of Bloomington, receivership. The Square Turn Tractor Company of Norfolk, Nebraska, receivership. The Victory Tractor Company of Greensburg, Indiana, receivership. The Ford Drive Tractor Company of Big Rapids, Michigan, receivership. The Dart Truck and Tractor Corporation of Waterloo, Iowa, receivership. And the biggest one of all, General Motors. General Motors, the full General Motors, had launched a tractor in 1918 called the Samson. By 1922, General Motors had lost $33 million on the Samson, and the GM board voted to liquidate the entire tractor division.
General Motors gave up on tractors.
General Motors gave up on tractors. Total industry tally. Between 1900 and 1922, the National Implement and Vehicle Association found that 60 firms had sold out or consolidated with other companies. 66 more had been completely liquidated. The American tractor industry, which in 1918 had over 200 manufacturers, was, by 1925, down to about a dozen meaningful players.
Pushback. If the whole industry is collapsing and even General Motors is bailing out, why doesn't Deere bail out? They could have walked away from the Waterloo Boy in 1922 and gone back to the plow business they understood. Why don't they?
That is a good push. The honest answer is they almost did. The Waterloo plant nearly shuttered in 1922. There were 1,000 unsold Waterloo Boy tractors stacked up at the Iowa factory. Production essentially stopped for 6 months. The Deere board considered exiting the tractor business and writing off the entire $2.25 million acquisition as a loss. What stopped them? One person, William Butterworth, the lawyer's son-in-law CEO that the federal government had called much weakened by lack of experience. He looked at the numbers in 1922 and made the call. Deere stays in tractors, even at a loss, even with 1,000 units in inventory, because the alternative is to leave Henry Ford in possession of the entire mechanized agricultural future of the United States. And Butterworth was not willing to do that.
Butterworth saved the company.
Butterworth saved the company, the man the federal government underestimated.
And here is what happens next. Henry Ford gives up.
Henry Ford gives up. By 1928, Ford has decided to focus his industrial capacity on the next generation of cars, the new Model A, and to exit the tractor business. He shutters U.S. Fordson production, sells the rights overseas, walks away.
Why did Ford give up?
The honest answer, and historians disagree on this, but the best version is Ford ran the math at $395 per unit and realized he could not beat the Deere dealer network at any price. The Fordson sold through Ford automotive dealers who knew nothing about agriculture. Deere sold through the branch house network Charles Deere set up in 1869. Second-generation farmers' sons who knew exactly which fields needed which tools. Ford could not buy that network, he could not beat that network, and he could not afford to lose money against it indefinitely.
Deere won the price war by not winning the price war.
Deere won the price war by not winning the price war. They held at $890 while Ford collapsed to $395. They lost market share for 4 years. They almost died. And then Ford left. And by 1929, Deere was the second largest tractor maker in America, behind International Harvester.
Playbook moment.
Playbook moment. In a price war between a manufacturer and a distribution network, the distribution network usually wins. The branch house Charles Deere built in Kansas City in 1869 was, 50 years later, the asset that defeated Henry Ford. The channel is the moat.
Sam, I want to take the next section because it is going to plant something for Act 3. Handed.
It is yours.
In the middle of the 1920-1921 business debacle, while Deere is figuring out whether to stay in tractors, the federal government opens its first major investigation of the agricultural implement industry. May 4th, 1920, the Federal Trade Commission releases a report. The report is 299 pages long. It is titled, and this is verbatim, Report of the Federal Trade Commission on the Causes of High Prices of Farm Implements.
What did they find?
They found that the major manufacturers, Deere and International Harvester and Case and a dozen others, had been sharing detailed cost information through their trade association, the National Implement and Vehicle Association, since 1914. The association had a cost bureau with coded confidential identifiers. Companies submitted their costs, the association compared them, the numbers were shared back to members. The FTC argued that this was, quote, a cloak for conferences to make agreements on price. And was it? Some of the time, almost certainly yes. the FTC subpoenaed letters going back and forth between the manufacturers. One letter quoted in the report is from the J.I. Case Plow Works to the La Crosse Plow Company in 1917. It is the smoking gun. The letter reads, and this is verbatim, "We are very glad to have the opportunity of comparing prices with you, and inasmuch as this is all illegal, suggest that you destroy this letter when you are through with it."
They wrote, "This is all illegal. Suggest you destroy this letter."
They wrote, "This is all illegal. Suggest you destroy this letter." And then somebody at La Crosse kept the letter, and the FTC found it and put it in the report, which became the basis for a federal antitrust case.
A federal antitrust case against the industry.
Against the industry. The case primarily targeted International Harvester, but Deere was deeply implicated. Burton Peep, the longtime Deere lawyer who would much later become president of the company, gave a defense speech at the National Implement and Vehicle Association Convention in October 1920. The speech was reprinted in trade journals and bound as a pamphlet that was distributed to American business leaders nationwide who felt threatened by the FTC. Peek's main argument was that the FTC had inflated the industry's profits by using the wrong metrics. The actual return on capital, per a Haskins and Sellows audit, was 6.51% over the war years, lower than pre-war earnings. Peek asked the U.S. Attorney General, quote, "Upon what theory of the law, I should like to inquire, would the Attorney General proceed?"
Peek was a fighter.
Peek was a fighter. The industry went to court. The case wound through federal courts for 7 years, and in 1927, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of the industry. The decision said, quote, "The fact that competitors in business may see proper, in the exercise of their own judgment, to follow the prices of another manufacturer does not establish any suppression of competition or show any sinister domination."
SCOTUS vindicates the industry.
SCOTUS vindicates the industry. The 1927 ruling stands for 10 years, until 1938, when the FTC investigates again. And that 1938 investigation will, 10 years after that, in 1948, lead to a major Department of Justice antitrust case against Deere, International Harvester, and J.I. Case. We will tell that story later in this act. And, open loop, that 1948 case will, 77 years later, become the historical predecessor to a 2025 FTC lawsuit against Deere over right to repair. Hold this for a moment. The federal government will come after Deere's distribution network 4 times across the next 105 years, 1920, 1938, 1948, then 2025. Each time, the issue is the same. Each time, the remedy the government wants is the same. The government wants Deere forced to deal with anyone who wants to be a dealer. 3 of the 4 times, Deere wins. The 4th time, in 2025, Deere settles for $99 million. We will get to that in Act 3.
Plant that. 4 federal pushes against Deere's distribution network across a century. The pattern is going to come back. Alex, the year is now 1928. Henry Ford has exited the tractor business. Deere has survived the Fordson and the 1920 debacle and the FTC investigation. The American economy is in the roaring 20s. The agricultural industry is recovering, and the most important succession in the history of Deere & Company is about to happen.
Tell me.
William Butterworth, the lawyer who saved the company by not letting it exit tractors, retires after 20 years as president. The board picks his replacement. They pick a 35-year-old.
His name?
His name is Charles Deere Wiman. He's the great-grandson of John Deere. The lineage goes, John Deere had a son, Charles Deere. Charles Deere had a daughter, Anna Deere Wiman, the one who married William Wiman in 1890 with $1 million wedding gift. Anna and Will Wiman had a son in early 1892, and they named him Charles Deere Wiman. That son is now, in 1928, 36 years old. He is Yale Sheffield Scientific School educated, the same school George Mixter went to. He served as a captain in the U.S. Army in World War I. He has been at Deere for less than a decade, and he is named after his great-grandfather.
He carries the family name into the next century.
He carries the family name into the next century. October 29th, 1929, about 13 months after he takes office, is Black Tuesday. The Great Depression begins.
Wiman is 37. He has been CEO for about a year.
Wiman is 36. He has been CEO for 14 months, and what he does in the next 4 years is going to be the most important business decision in 20th century American agriculture.
Sit with that for a beat. Picture the office in Moline, October 1929. The board meeting where the first reports of the New York crash arrive. Wiman sitting at the head of the table, 36 years old, named after his grandfather. The Deere family name on the door, and the world economy collapsing on schedule.
What does he do?
What does he do? We are about to spend the next 25 minutes finding out. The Wiman 1932 decision is the moment that pretty much every business history book about Deere comes back to, and the standard short version of the story is Wiman decided not to foreclose on farmers during the Depression. Deere kept the farmers in business. The farmers came back 50 years later. The end.
The actual story.
The actual story is that Wiman made not one decision, but 3 in 1 year. And each one of them taken on its own would have been radical for an industrial CEO of his era. Together, they bought the next 90 years of Deere & Company's brand. 3 pillars. Take them with me.
Take me through them.
Pillar 1, their receivables policy. The decision to carry farmers through the worst of the Depression instead of foreclosing on them. Pillar 2, the bank bailout. The decision in late 1932 to use Deere's own corporate cash to save the People's Savings Bank of Moline from a $1.29 million embezzlement scandal. Pillar 3, the Soviet deal. The decision to continue selling tractors to Stalin's collectivization program while the Soviets were funding the purchases with art they sold off the Romanov estate and wheat they sold from the Ukrainian famine.
3 pillars.
3 pillars. Let me set the macro before each one. Deere lost money for 3 consecutive years, 1931, 1932, and 1933. Sales went from a peak of $76 million in 1929 to $63 million in 1930, to $27.7 in 1931, to $8.7 million in 1932. Annual losses of just over $1 million in 1931, $5.7 million in 1932, $4.3 million in 1933.
$8.7 million in revenue in 1932, down from $76 million 3 years earlier.
An 89% collapse. Pillar 1, the receivable.
Take me through Pillar 1.
At the end of 1930, Deere's receivables, the money owed to the company by farmers and dealers, totaled $55.9 million. That is 83% of sales. The historical norm was around 27%. The receivables were ballooning because farmers couldn't pay.
How big was the farmer paper specifically?
Of that $55.9 million in total receivables, $12 million was direct farmer paper. $25 million was dealer paper for current goods. $9 million was dealer paper for carryover. $3.8 million was owed by Russia. $2.8 million by Argentina and other foreign countries. The rest was miscellaneous.
Hold on. Russia owed Deere $3.8 million at the end of 1930?
Russia owed Deere $3.8 million at the end of 1930. That is the Soviet deal. We will come back to it in Pillar 3. Keep going on the farmers for now.
Keep going.
The standard playbook in the industry was to send the repo agents out. International Harvester was doing it. Alice Chalmers was doing it. Massey Harris was doing it. Every major equipment company in America was foreclosing on farmers. There was an internal voice at Deere arguing for the same approach. His name was M.J. Healy. He was the head of the Kansas City branch, and he was, by all accounts, blunt.
Quote Healy.
I will. Healy's instructions to his Kansas City collectors in late 1931, quote, farmers should pay us before they pay other creditors. Manufacturers were making wealth-producing farm equipment absolutely necessary for farmers to have, and therefore, this was conclusive evidence that we are entitled to the first payment. It would not be fair
for the farmers to pay for luxuries purchased with the money produced by our implements before they discharge their obligations to us." End quote.
Healy wanted Deere to foreclose.
Healy wanted Deere to foreclose. He had a real economic argument. Foreclosure was the rational decision per any standard business school analysis. The other equipment manufacturers were doing it. The cash recovery was real. Holding farmer paper meant betting that the rain would come back and prices would recover. Healy thought that bet was unsound. Wiman thought it was sound.
What did Wiman actually decide?
He decided that the company's policy, and I am quoting Broehl, the corporate biographer, verbatim, would be, quote, "to carry the farmer as long as necessary to amortize the debt," end quote. Not no foreclosure ever. Some farmers had abandoned their land and would be written off as bad debts. But the working farmer who couldn't pay this year because of the price collapse, that farmer would not have his tractor repossessed.
Soft pushback. We've been calling this no foreclosure. It's not really no foreclosure. It's carry the working farmer. Some farmers, the ones who abandoned their land entirely, still lost their equipment. The narrative is cleaner than the reality.
Fair pushback. The narrative is cleaner than the reality. And it matters, because here is the actual number. From 1913 through 1932, over 20 years, Deere had written off only $6.6 million of bad debt out of $803 million in cumulative sales. That's a write-off rate of less than 1%. During the Depression, the write-off rates spiked to 4 to 8% annually. But across the entire 22-year period, 99.2% of farmer debt was ultimately paid.
99%.
99%. Women's bet was that the rain would come back. And it did. By 1934, the farmers who had been carried through 1931 and 1932 were buying new equipment again. They were buying the Model A tractor, which launched in 1934, and the Model B, which launched in 1935. And they were buying them, and this is what makes the policy work in retrospect, from the only equipment company in America that hadn't foreclosed on their fathers.
Wait, their fathers, plural?
Their fathers, plural. 50 years later, in the 1980s, Deere's own marketing surveys would ask farmers in the Corn Belt the question, why do you buy from us instead of from a competitor? And the number one answer for a generation was, Deere stood by my grandfather in the Depression. 50 years. The brand equity created by Wiman's one accounting decision in 1931 was still showing up in sales data in 1985.
Pillar 1. Carry the farmers, lose money in the short term, buy 50 years of brand loyalty.
Pillar 1.
Pillar 2 is the bank.
Take it.
Late 1932, in Moline, Illinois, there is a bank called the People's Savings Bank. I need to tell you the history of this bank specifically because almost no source on the Wiman decision tells it properly.
Tell it.
The People's Savings Bank of Moline was founded in 1857 by a man named John Gould. John Gould was John Deere's old partner, remember from Act 1? John Gould was the New Hampshire bookkeeper who joined the original Deere, Tate, and Gould partnership in 1848, who paid for his stake with a future loan, who Deere bought out in 1852. After Gould left the plow company, he founded a bank in Moline, the bank.
John Deere's old partner founded the bank?
John Deere's old partner founded the bank. In 1863, the bank reorganized as the First National Bank of Moline. And in 1866, 3 years later, John Deere himself became president of that bank.
John Deere was a bank president.
For 1 year, 1866. Then, in 1891, Charles Deere founded a separate institution, the People's Savings Bank of Moline, and served as its first president. The two banks merged in 1905. When Charles Deere died in 1907, William Butterworth became president of the merged bank. Through the 1920s and into the 1930s, Deere & Company's corporate secretary, a man named George Crampton, was chairman of the bank board. Deere & Company kept about $2 million on deposit at the bank.
So the bank Wiman is about to bail out is not just a random Moline bank.
It is the bank John Deere's old partner founded, the bank John Deere was president of, the bank Charles Deere founded as a separate institution and was president of, the bank William Butterworth has been chairman of since Charles died, and the bank Deere and Company is currently the largest depositor of.
It is the family bank. Late 1932. The bank cashier and two inside accomplices have, over a period of time, embezzled approximately $1.2 million from the bank. Most of the money was squandered on real estate investments that have lost value in the Depression. The embezzlement is discovered. The state bank examiner is going to close the bank the next day. When the bank closes, the $7 million in savings deposits, most of it from Deere factory workers, will be lost.
$7 million from the workers at the company's own factories?
$7 million from the workers at the company's own factories. The night before the bank examiner arrives, Wiman has an emergency meeting. Butterworth is in Washington. He has been serving as national president of the United States Chamber of Commerce and is in Washington consulting President Hoover on the economic situation. So Butterworth is unavailable except by phone. The meeting is Wiman, George Crampton, the corporate treasurer, T.F. Wharton, and the sales chief, Frank Silloway. Overnight, in Moline,
They have to decide whether to save the bank.
they have to decide whether to save the bank. That night, they write the check, a Deere and Company check to the People's Savings Bank for $1,290,000.
$1.29 million.
Then Wiman, Butterworth, and Dwight Wiman, Wyman's younger brother, personally guarantee an additional $650,000 in notes from their own pockets. The next morning, Wiman calls a special board meeting. He explains. The verbatim words he used are in the company archive. Listen.
I want to read this one. Hand me the quote.
Read it.
If we do not do this, the bank closes. As I view it, there are approximately $7 million of savings deposits in this bank, largely made by the wage earners of our factories, and the effects upon them of the closing of the bank and the resulting consequences to this company are beyond calculation.
That's the line.
That's the line. The board approves the bailout. The bank survives. The factory workers do not lose their savings. The Moline National Bank is reorganized in January 1933, owned 90% by Deere and Company. The remaining depositors of the People's Savings, who got only 40% of their holdings at first, are made completely whole by 1941. Deere insists no one lose money.
Now here is the internal antagonist, because we have spent the whole act so far portraying Wiman's decisions as obviously right. There was a voice inside the company at this exact moment who thought Wiman was wrong. That voice is C.C. Weber.
C.C. Weber, Charles Deere's nephew, the head of the Minneapolis branch, the branch house manager who, in 1902, had told Charles Deere not to do the Plow Trust, the man who has been part of every major Deere decision for 40 years. What does he say?
Weber writes Wiman a stinging letter shortly after the bailout. I have a verbatim. Here's the relevant paragraph.
Read it.
I have not paid any attention to it of late years, but you had a deposit in that bank of about $2 million when this trouble occurred, and you had it there for some time. These gentlemen tell me that the thought in having Deere and Company keep this big deposit in this bank was so that it would be as big as its neighbor. That is all nonsense. The size of the bank has nothing to do with its solidity or its worth to the community. It is this big Deere and Company deposit that has helped cause this trouble, and it has caused our company a great big loss. It is up to you two gentlemen to realize and change the situation and change it right away. Lord knows, stop it now and correct it.
Weber is furious.
Weber is furious. And here's the thing. Weber is right. The bank had been carrying an excessively large Deere deposit because of family pride. Wiman's reply to Weber is, quote, I agree thoroughly with you about the carrying of bank balances. My predilection is for Deere and Company and not for banking. You have no idea how much trouble this whole affair has caused us, end quote.
Wiman admits Weber is right.
Wiman admits Weber is right. And then, the psychological cost. I need to read this paragraph from Broehl verbatim because it is one of the great character-revealing sentences in the entire book.
Read it.
The weight of the decisions troubled Wiman so much during this period that he became, at least temporarily, an insomniac, pacing the halls of Overlook, perhaps walking in some of the footsteps that his grandfather, Charles Deere, must have made in the trying times of the proposed combinations and plow trusts at the turn of the century.
He paced the halls of Overlook in the same footsteps Charles Deere had paced during the Plow Trust negotiations. The great-grandson of John Deere, in the same house, working through these same kinds of impossible decisions 3 decades apart.
3 decades apart.
Pillar 2. Save the bank. Save the workers' deposits. Save the family name on the institution that bears the family. Pay for it with personal notes. And lie awake at night about whether you were right.
Pillar 2.
Pillar 3 is the Soviets.
Pillar 3 is the Soviets.
Take it, because this one is wild.
This one is wild. Joseph Stalin, in 1928, launches the first 5-year plan. The centerpiece of the 5-year plan is the collectivization of Soviet agriculture. Stalin is going to combine the small peasant farms, the kulaks, into giant collective farms. He is going to do this brutally. By the early 1930s, the collectivization will have killed millions of people, including in the Ukrainian famine of 1932 and 1933, the Holodomor, which kills somewhere between 3 and 7 million.
This is the context.
This is the context. Stalin needs tractors for the collective farms. The Soviet Union does not have a domestic tractor manufacturing capability worth mentioning. So Stalin's government, through a state trading entity called Amtorg, turns to American tractor manufacturers. The first orders go to International Harvester, then to a small company that makes a tractor the Soviets particularly love. That tractor is Henry Ford's Fordson.
The Soviets loved the Fordson.
The Soviets loved the Fordson. There is a 1923 postage stamp, you can look it up today, that depicts the Fordson tractor on its face. The Fordson was the first American tractor sold in significant volume to the USSR.
Stalin was a Henry Ford fan.
Stalin was a Henry Ford fan. The Soviets bought tens of thousands of Fordsons in the mid-1920s. And then starting in 1924, they began also buying from Deere. The first Deere order was 500 plows, then more plows. Then by 1929, John Deere Model D tractors. One order alone in 1929 was for 1,500 Model Ds, then another for 2,000. The Deere board was nervous. The United States did not officially recognize the Soviet Union, but Frank Silloway, the Deere sales chief, kept pushing the orders through. His logic, recorded in board minutes, was, quote, "If we believe that the present government will remain in power until November 1, 1930, and pay the money they will owe us at that time, we would be justified in accepting this order." End quote.
That is the most pragmatic anti-communist analysis I have ever heard.
That is the most pragmatic anti-communist analysis you have ever heard. Over the 3 years, 1929 to 1931, the Soviets bought $9.8 million worth of Deere goods. In 1 year alone, 1930, they bought $5.6 million, which was almost 10% of Deere's total $63 million revenue that year. Deere's tractor exports to the Soviet Union were 20% of all U.S. tractor exports to the USSR in 1930, and over 12% for the entire 1927 to 1933 period. 8,187 Deere tractors went to the USSR between 1927 and 1933.
8,187 Deere tractors.
8,187 Deere tractors to a communist dictator who was simultaneously starving millions of Ukrainians. And here is the question. How did Stalin pay?
How did Stalin pay?
2 ways. One, by selling priceless Russian art on the world market, including the imperial collection from the Hermitage. One of the biggest buyers, and I am not making this up, was Andrew Mellon. Yes, the same Andrew Mellon who served as Secretary of the Treasury under Hoover. The same Andrew Mellon who in October 1929 said, quote, "I see nothing in the present situation that is either menacing or warrants pessimism," unquote. The same Andrew Mellon who was the namesake of the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., which exists because Mellon donated the Russian imperial art he had been buying off Stalin.
I want to pause on this. Andrew Mellon, American Treasury Secretary, bought priceless Romanov art from Stalin, donated the art to the United States National Gallery. The art was the down payment on tractors that Stalin was buying from Deere.
That is the chain.
That is one of the most American capitalism meets Soviet communism stories I have ever heard.
And here is the second way Stalin paid: by selling Ukrainian wheat on the world market, while Ukrainians starved. The wheat that Ukrainian peasants grew, that the Soviet state collected at gunpoint, that was then shipped to American grain markets, that wheat funded the tractor purchases that Deere depended on through the worst of the Great Depression.
God. Hold that for a second.
Hold that for a second.
And there is one more piece of this story that I have never told anyone.
Tell it.
There was, in 1931, a children's book published in the Soviet Union about one of the collective farms. The farm was in a place called Yish District. The collective farm had 86 pieces of equipment, 40 Caterpillar track-laying tractors, 37 Model D John Deeres, and a few others. The children's book has a passage about one of the Model Ds. The Model D is a character in the book. Listen.
Listen.
Racing along runs a 2-cylinder tractor of John Deere make. He shines with spurs, and the noise of his motor carries the echo far into the villages. John Deere showed himself a punctual good worker on a hard service in machine tractor station. With obstinateness, given honor to American steel, he carries along with steadiness. Only after a month and a half of unceased labor, the machine began to demand attention. The aim of this tale is to show that the tractor John Deere and wheat Little Ukraine are heroes of the success told above.
The Soviets wrote a children's book where the John Deere tractor is the hero.
The Soviets wrote a children's book where the John Deere tractor is the hero. In 1931, while their grain was funding their tractor purchases from the company that was using the cash to avoid foreclosing on American farmers.
That is the entire 1932 Wiman decision compressed into one image.
That is the entire 1932 Wiman decision compressed into one image. The Soviets paid every contract on time, every single one. Through the worst of their own collectivization disaster, through the famine, they paid Deere on schedule. The final payments came in November 1933, right when due.
Open loop from Act 1. Pay it off now.
Pay it off now. In Act 1, we read a journal entry written by Charles Deere, Wiman's great-grandfather, on February 7th, 1860. 22-year-old Charles, on a sales trip in Illinois, wrote a single sentence on a single page of his memorandum book. The sentence was, "I will never from this 7th day of February, 1860 AD, put my name to a paper that I do not expect to pay. So help me God."
That's the Act 1 pledge.
That's the Act 1 pledge. 72 years later, his great-grandson is in a boardroom in Moline. The boardroom that was, at the time of the pledge, on the same property where Charles Deere paced. And his great-grandson is making 3 decisions. He is putting Deere & Company's name on paper that he does not know if his customers can pay. He is putting Deere & Company's name on paper to save a bank that the family helped found. He is putting Deere & Company's name on paper to ship tractors to a communist dictator. And all 3 of those papers, all 3, get paid. Because Wiman has internalized, 4 generations later, his great-grandfather's commitment. We do not put our name on paper we do not believe will be paid.
Beat.
Beat. The decisions hold across 100 years.
3 pillars. The receivables, the bank, the Soviets. And one Charles Deere pledge from 1860 echoing through all 3.
That is the Wiman decision.
How does the company actually come back?
Slowly, and then with 2 iconic tractors and an industrial designer.
Take it.
In 1934, Deere launches the Model A tractor, 16 horsepower at the drawbar, 23 on the belt pulley, 2-cylinder, 4-speed transmission, priced at around $800. Over the life of the product line, and listen to this number, 293,000 units sold.
293,000.
One of the best-selling tractors in Deere's history.
How big is that?
293,000 tractors, enough that if you parked them end to end, the line would stretch from Moline, Illinois to Atlanta, Georgia.
Picture that. 300,000 tractors lined up bumper to bumper from the Mississippi River to North Georgia. That is one Deere product line.
One product line. And then the Model B in 1935, smaller, 9 horsepower at the drawbar, 14 on the belt. 2/3 the size and 2/3 the cost of the Model A. Designed for the small 40-acre family farm that would otherwise be priced out of mechanized agriculture. 309,000 Model Bs sold.
Combined, over 600,000 Model A and B tractors in 20 years. The two best-selling tractor product lines in Deere's history are both born within 12 months of each other during the worst year of the Great Depression.
Both were designed to use the same factory line with part substitution, a piece of manufacturing engineering 25 years before Toyota invented lean production.
Lean before lean.
Lean before lean.
And the farmers buying these tractors, almost to a person, are the farmers women did not foreclose on 3 years earlier. The bet pays off in 1934.
But here's the other thing that happens in 1937, which is Deere becomes a design company.
A design company?
A design company. Up to 1937, every Deere tractor was, like every American tractor, designed by engineers for performance. The aesthetics were utilitarian, boxy, industrial, strictly functional. And then, and I'm going to take this section because it is one of my favorite small stories in the entire Broehl book, in late 1937, Deere's Waterloo Tractor Works engineers decide they want to make their tractors more beautiful.
This is the late 30s. Industrial design is suddenly a real discipline. Are they responding to a specific designer or just the general trend?
Because they have noticed that good industrial design has become a thing in the late 1930s. The trimline phone, the Polaroid camera, the Hoover vacuum. There is a guy in New York named Henry Dreyfuss who has been redesigning consumer products to be both functional and visually striking. The engineers tell their boss, Charles Stone, who runs all of manufacturing, that they want to hire Dreyfuss. Stone gruffly says, quote, "I don't think much of the idea, but the boys up here want it, so go ahead." End quote.
So they hire Dreyfuss.
They don't even hire him properly. The engineers delegate one of their own, a guy named Elmer McCormick, to go to New York and pitch Dreyfuss. McCormick, by all accounts, was not a sophisticated traveler. He showed up in Manhattan in late fall wearing a fur coat and a straw hat.
A fur coat and a straw hat.
A fur coat and a straw hat. The story, probably apocryphal but often retold inside the company, is that McCormick so impressed Dreyfuss with the potential of redesigning the tractor as an industrial object that Dreyfuss got on the train that very night and traveled straight to Waterloo, Iowa.
Harry Dreyfuss on a train from Manhattan to Waterloo, Iowa in late 1937 on a hunch.
On a hunch. By November 1937, Dreyfuss and his New York team had built a wooden mock-up of a streamlined Model B tractor. They unveiled it to a startled Waterloo group. The mock-up had a narrower radiator cowling for better visibility, sweeping horizontal louver slits instead of the standard radiator grille, a redesigned dash. By the 1938 model year, both the Model A and Model B had been restyled. The mid-century look of the John Deere tractor, the look you recognize when you see an antique tractor in a county fair today, that look traces to Henry Dreyfuss, November 1937, on a hunch.
And Dreyfuss continued to consult for Deere, and this is the part the company never tells you. For the rest of his life, Henry Dreyfuss and his associates designed Deere tractors continuously from 1937 onward. The relationship lasted through the 4020 tractor in 1963, which we will get to in Act 3. Hewitt's Sardin Design Corporate Headquarters, Act 3. The design heritage of John Deere as a corporate identity is downstream of one Manhattan visit by an engineer in a fur coat and straw hat.
Plant for Act 3. Deere is not only a manufacturing company, it is a design company, like Apple, like Brown. Has been since 1937. And around the same time as the Dreyfuss work, in 1935, Deere makes a partnership move that almost nobody outside the company remembers, the Caterpillar Joint Dealership Arrangement.
Take it.
In January 1935, Caterpillar, at this point the dominant maker of track-laying construction tractors, approaches Deere with a proposal. COT says, "We don't want to manufacture wheel-type tractors. You don't want to manufacture track-type tractors. Let's join dealer networks. You sell our track tractors, we sell your wheel tractors. Combine, and California especially, where farmers need both kinds."
And Deere agrees.
Deere agrees. Frank Silloway, the Deere sales chief, recommends it to the board. Says, quote, "We do not desire to manufacture track-type tractors, but inasmuch as the Caterpillar industrial dealers wanted a wheel-type tractor, through this Caterpillar arrangement, we will have an opportunity to get into this industrial business in an important way." End quote.
And here's the part I love most.
Tell me.
As part of the deal, and this just floors me, Caterpillar gives Deere their Hillside Combine business for free. The patents, the templates, the dies, the jigs, the blueprints, the advertising, the existing finished inventory, all transferred to Deere at no cost because Cat had decided combines were getting in the way of their construction machinery business and they wanted out. So they handed the whole combine product line to Deere as a gift, essentially, in exchange for the joint dealer arrangement.
Caterpillar gave Deere a tractor product line for free.
Caterpillar gave Deere a combine product line for free in 1935. The joint dealer arrangement ran continuously through World War II and into the 1950s. Many small-town American implement dealers in the 1940s sold both Deere agricultural tractors and Caterpillar construction tractors out of the same showroom. The two companies cooperated in California, in Latin America, in foreign markets where neither could justify a full standalone dealer network alone.
And then World War II arrives.
World War II, Deere produces military equipment, the M29 Weasel-tracked cargo carrier, aircraft components, ammunition. Charles Deere Wiman himself, by now in his late 40s, accepts a commission as a colonel in the Ordnance Department of the United States Army. He spends most of the war years in Washington on the War Production Board, helping the federal government coordinate manufacturing capacity across American industry. Burton Peake, the lawyer who gave the famous 1920 pamphlet defense against the FTC investigation, acts as Deere's president during the war, while Wiman is in Washington.
How is Wiman during the war?
Tired. The war years are punishing. He is shuttling between Moline and Washington, running a corporation, advising on national manufacturing capacity, eating in cafeterias, sleeping on trains. By the time the war ends, he is 53. He has been at this, the war work plus the company, for the better part of 4 years.
And he comes home.
He comes home. He resumes the presidency in 1944. He runs the company through the post-war boom, the late 1940s into the 1950s. American agriculture is mechanizing fast, and Deere is winning a bigger share of it every year. By 1950, Deere is closing on International Harvester for the #1 position in American tractors. Wiman is, by all accounts, exhausted, but still in the chair. And in 1948, in the middle of Wiman's slow decline, 3 years after the war ends, the federal government opens a new chapter in the regulatory pattern. We need to spend a minute on this, because it is the third of the 4 FTC or DOJ pushes against Deere's distribution network across a century.
The 1948 antitrust case.
The 1948 antitrust case. September 10, 1948. Lawyers for the U.S. Attorney General file a complaint against Deere & Company, International Harvester, and J.I. Case Company in the U.S. District Court for the District of Minnesota. The charge? That the 3 companies are forcing their dealers to refuse to handle competing equipment. The legal theory, Sherman Act Section 2 plus the Clayton Act. The remedy the government wants? Quote, that the defendant be perpetually enjoined from refusing to sell farm machinery to any dealer because said dealer purchases or sells farm machinery manufactured or sold by another than the defendant. End quote.
Sam aside, the remedy the government is asking for in 1948, that Deere be forced to sell to any dealer who wants to sell Deere, is structurally the same remedy the FTC will ask for in 2025 when they sue Deere over the right to repair. The 1948 case is about exclusive dealing. The 2025 case is about software repair lockouts. Different behaviors, same structural remedy. The government wants Deere forced to deal with everyone.
That is the pattern. Plant it. Now, the case. Deere's lead counsel is a guy named Budge Cook, the general counsel. His quote on the stakes? Quote, "This is not a money matter, but involves the future functioning of our sales organization. The stake is our ability and our right to market our products." End quote.
So Deere preps the defense.
Deere preps the defense. Deere has a written policy since Burton Peak's 1938 Bulletin to all employees that says, quote, "Don't use the big stick in getting business," end quote. They commissioned Dun & Bradstreet to interview Deere dealers nationally. Dun & Bradstreet finds that 75% of Deere dealers handle at least some competing equipment, which means the exclusive dealing allegation is largely false.
And then the government decides to try case first.
The government decides to try case first. The case trial runs through April and May 1951 before a federal judge named Gunnar H. Nordby. 1,940 pages of testimony. And then Nordby dismisses the case. Comprehensively, the entire government argument turned away. Nordby's opinion runs over a dozen pages and becomes a landmark in antitrust law.
Read the key line.
The key line, quote, "Efforts in salesmanship were used to convince the prospective dealer that his future was more promising if he would devote his efforts to the case line rather than being occupied principally with other activities. But such a policy, in absence of coercion and pressure, merely reflects sound business judgment and reasonable competitive efforts, which do not necessarily constitute competitive restrictions." End quote.
Translation, selling hard isn't antitrust.
Selling hard isn't antitrust. The case against Deere is dismissed in April 1952, without prejudice, meaning the government reserved the right to file again, but it never did. Defending the case cost Deere more than $1 million. The dealer network moat survives.
3 federal pushes against Deere's distribution network. 1920, Wanat SCOTUS 1927. 1938, Burton Peak's internal no big stick bulletin diffused it. 1948, Wanat trial 1951. And there will be a fourth.
There will be a fourth. 73 years later, in 2025, the FTC will sue Deere over right to repair software lockouts. And Deere will, for the first time in 100 years of federal regulatory action, settle for $99 million. We will tell that story in Act 3.
Sometime in 1954, Wiman learns he has a fatal illness. The diagnosis is private. He tells the board, his family, almost no one else. He is 62 years old. He is given just a few months to live. He keeps working. On May 12, 1955, Charles Deere Wiman dies in Moline. He has been president of Deere for roughly 25 years across 2 stints, 1928 to 1942 and 1944 to 1955, with Burton Peak serving as interim president during his war years in Washington. He has survived 2 depressions, 2 FTC investigations, 1 antitrust case, and 1 near extinction by Henry Ford. He never retires. He works to the end.
And the succession plan.
The succession plan was set 7 years earlier, in 1948, long before the diagnosis, when Wiman was healthy and apparently planning a long retirement. In 1948, Patricia Wiman, Wiman's daughter, who has just turned 19, marries a man named William Hewitt. Hewitt is a Berkeley graduate, has been at Deere 7 years, has been working his way up through the marketing organization. He is 33 when he marries Patricia. He is not Deere blood, but by marriage, he becomes the next Deere.
Same pattern as Butterworth at 1907. Marry the daughter, inherit the company.
Same pattern. Charles Deere's daughter Anna married William Wiman, who produced the next CEO. Patricia Wiman now marries William Hewitt, who becomes the next CEO. The family passes the company through daughters to their husbands. It is structurally the Deere succession ritual.
5 CEOs in 145 years. 4 of them, including Hewitt, married into the family.
1955. Wiman is dead. Hewitt is 40 years old. The company has roughly 20,000 employees, annual revenue around $350 million. Second in tractor sales, behind International Harvester, but closing the gap. And the man inheriting all of this has a vision for what Deere can become next.
Alex, take us into Act 3.
Open loops for Act 3.
4 open loops. Loop 1. Hewitt is going to commission a Finnish-American architect named Eero Saarinen to design a corporate campus on 1,200 acres outside Moline. Core 10 steel, earth and rust. The Henry Dreyfuss design philosophy applied to corporate architecture. We will visit it.
Loop 2, Hewitt is going to launch a tractor in 1963 called the 4020. 184,000 units built, climate control cab, differential lock, 80 horsepower, the most beloved tractor in Deere's history, Henry Dreyfuss designed.
Loop 3, the dark one. The 1980s farm crisis. Paul Volcker raises rates to 19% in June 1981. Farm debt explodes from $50 billion to $190 billion. The 1986 net loss of $229 million, the first annual loss since the Great Depression. The 1986 to 1987 UAW strike of 163 days. The moment Deere, the company that walked through 1932 intact, almost dies again.
Loop 4, the regulatory ghost. The 1948 antitrust case is going to come back in 2025 with the same structural remedy. And this time, Deere will not win. We will settle for $99 million and a 10-year forced disclosure decree.
4 loops. See you after the break.
After the break, Act 3, John Deere becomes a computer company.
See you after the break.
It is the morning of December 10th, 1986. We are in a conference room in Moline, Illinois. There are 8 men around the table. There is one document in front of them. The document is 1 page long. The document is the company's annual report. It contains a single number on the first line.
How big?
Negative $229 million.
$229 million in the red.
In the red. The first annual loss Deere & Company has posted since the Great Depression. The first loss since the moment we ended Act 2 on the Wiman decision in 1932. 54 years of unbroken profitability. Broken on 1 page in front of 8 men in 1986.
Who is sitting at the head of the table?
A man named Robert Hansen, 60 years old. He is the CEO of Deere & Company. He took the job in August 1982, so as of this morning, he has been CEO for 4.5 years, and he has presided over the worst 4 years in the company's history since 1932.
Don't worry about his name, listener. Robert Hansen is going to step off the stage in a few years, and we are not going to spend much more time with him. What matters about him is that he is the man holding the page when the streak ends.
And he is about to make a decision that mirrors the one Charles Deere Wiman made in 1932. And the decision is the same shape, by the way. The decision is, does Deere keep being the company that does not foreclose, or does Deere finally, 50 years later, become a normal company?
Pause on that for a second. Picture the room, the 8 men, the page, the single number. Hansen can do one of 2 things. He can call the bankers and the analysts and announce a cost-cutting plan, including aggressive collection on outstanding farmer accounts. The market will reward that decision. The stock will go up. The 1932 promise will be quietly retired. Or he can hold the line. He can say, we are not going to foreclose on our customers, even now, even when we are losing $229 million, even when the stock is going to keep falling, even when the union is on day 143 of a strike against us.
Welcome to Act 3. The streak is broken, the crisis is on, and the question for the next 50 minutes is, does the company that Wiman built in 1932 survive 1986? And does the company that survives 1986 still recognize itself when, 40 years later in 2026, the United States Federal Trade Commission sues it for monopolizing the right to repair a tractor?
I'm Sam.
I'm Alex.
And this is John Deere Act 3.
Alex, before we go further, quick signpost for the listener. Act 3 covers the 70 years from 1955 to 2026. That is a lot of ground. We are going to focus on 3 arcs.
3 arcs.
Arc 1, the Hewitt era, 1955 to 1982. This is the glamorous period, the Saarinen headquarters, the 4020 tractor, the move into Germany and Brazil. The Deere most people think of when they picture the company. Arc 2, the near death, 1982 to 1995. Volcker rates, the farm crisis, the strike, the recovery, the decision in 1986 we just opened on. Arc 3, the transformation, 1995 to today. A piece of farm equipment companies in 2026 is fundamentally a piece of software running on top of iron. We are going to walk through how that transformation happened, who built it, why it matters, and we're going to land on the lawsuit that is happening right now in 2026.
3 arcs: Hewitt's glory days, the 1980s near death, the software pivot.
3 arcs. Let's start with Eero Saarinen.
1955. William Hewitt becomes the new CEO of Deere & Company. 40 years old. Married to Charles Deere Wiman's daughter, Patricia, in 1948.
He's inherited the company through the Deere succession ritual we identified in Act 2. Marry the daughter, inherit the company.
Marry the daughter, inherit the company. And his first major decision, within his first year as CEO, is to acquire a German tractor maker.
1956, Heinrich Lahns of Mannheim, a storied German agricultural manufacturer, most famous for a tractor called the Lahns Bulldog, originally launched in 1921. The Bulldog was, for 40 years, the dominant tractor in continental Europe.
Deere buys Lahns, which means for the first time in the company's 120-year history, Deere has a factory in Europe. A factory built by Germans, run by Germans, selling to European farmers in Deutschmarks.
This is bigger than it sounds, because before 1956, Deere had basically been a North American company that occasionally exported a tractor to a foreign market. After 1956, Deere is becoming a multinational. Hewitt's vision is Deere should be selling tractors in every country that has fields.
And over his 27 years as CEO, he largely pulls that off. Brazil, 1979, Deere takes a 20% stake in a Brazilian manufacturer called SLC. Argentina, Venezuela, France, Spain, Great Britain, Australia, Japan, South Africa, China, the Middle East. By the time Hewitt retires in 1982, Deere is selling tractors on 6 continents.
This is the global Deere that you and I grew up knowing.
This is the global Deere, but Sam, there is a subplot to the Hewitt era that almost nobody tells. In the same year Hewitt buys Lahns, 1956, another agricultural manufacturer comes to him with a different proposal.
Who?
Massey Harris Ferguson, the Canadian company. By 1956,
second largest agricultural equipment manufacturer in the world, wants to merge with Deere to create a single dominant North American agricultural equipment company.
And Hewitt says
no. And here's the thing. Hewitt also says no to a Deutz merger proposal in the late 1960s. He says no to a Fiat partnership proposal in the early 1970s. He says no to a second Massey-Ferguson approach later. Through 27 years as CEO, Hewitt declines at least 4 major merger proposals from major international agricultural equipment competitors.
Pattern.
We talked in Act 2 about the almost mergers of the 19-teens, the J.I. Case talks that William Butterworth declined, the International Harvester merger negotiations he also declined, the British syndicate bid Charles Deere declined in 1889. We talked about Charles Deere's 2 failed Plow Trust attempts. Every generation of Deere CEOs has the same opportunity: consolidate, combine, sell. Every generation declines.
5 chief executives in 145 years, all of them except John Deere himself, married into the Deere family by some pathway, all of them with the same answer to the same question.
We stay independent.
That is the structural decision underneath all the structural decisions.
And while Hewitt is declining mergers and building European factories, he is also doing one specific thing in Moline that I want to spend a beat on, because it is the most photographed building in the history of American corporate architecture.
The Saarinen headquarters.
Open loop number 1 from Act 2, paying it off now. In 1956, Hewitt commissions a Finnish-American architect named Eero Saarinen to design a new corporate campus on 1,200 acres outside Moline. Saarinen had, just a few years earlier, designed the General Motors Technical Center in Detroit. He was, at this point, one of the 2 or 3 most famous architects in the world.
Picture the brief. Hewitt walks into Saarinen's office in 1956 and says, "I want a building that looks like a tractor company should look. Not a glass tower like General Motors, not an Art Deco palace. Something that says, we make heavy iron equipment for people who work the earth."
And Saarinen's answer is a material almost nobody had used on a non-industrial building before. It is called Cor-10 steel.
Cor-10.
It is a steel that is specifically engineered to rust on the outside surface. The rust forms a protective layer that prevents further corrosion. The building never needs to be painted. The exterior just oxidizes over the decades into this deep, earthen, rust-red color. Saarinen's ideal was the building should look like a piece of equipment that has been working in a field for 30 years.
Earthen rust steel for an iron equipment company. The Deere World headquarters opens in 1964. Saarinen sadly never sees it. He dies in 1961, brain tumor, age 51. His partners, Kevin Roche and John Dinkeloo, complete the building according to his designs.
And one detail I love. The main building is 7 stories tall, but it is set into a ravine. So when you walk up to it from the parking lot, the building appears to rise up out of the landscape, like a piece of iron that grew up out of the soil.
That is the metaphor Saarinen was building for. And by the way, that headquarters is still there. If you drive to Moline today and visit the John Deere World headquarters, you can. There are tours. It is, in 2026, still the headquarters of the company.
Okay, while Saarinen is building the headquarters, Deere's engineers in Waterloo, Iowa are designing a tractor. Open loop number 2 from Act 2, paying it off now. This is the 4020, launched 1963.
This is the most beloved Deere product of the 20th century. And to explain why, I want to do a quick dwell on what a tractor in 1963 actually was.
Go.
A tractor in 1963 is not a comfortable machine. It is loud. It does not have an enclosed cab. The farmer is sitting on a metal seat, exposed to the weather, exposed to the dust kicked up by the plow, exposed to the engine heat. A typical day plowing 40 acres is, in 1963, an exhausting, dirty, hot, dangerous job.
Picture your grandfather coming home from a day in the field, sunburned, caked in dust, half-deaf from the engine.
The 4020 changes that. It is the first Deere tractor to ship standard with, and I'm going to slow down here because each of these matters. 1, power steering, so the farmer's not wrestling the front wheels all day. 2, a differential lock,
which means you can actually drive in a straight line on a slope. 3. A power shift transmission with 8 forward gears you can change on the fly without clutching. 4. 91 horsepower at the power takeoff, about 15% more than the previous flagship, the 4010.
Better controls, more power, easier on the body.
Better controls, more power, easier on the body. The enclosed climate control cab, the thing that finally makes a tractor feel like a passenger vehicle, that does not arrive at Deere as standard until the Generation 2 tractors in 1972. For the 4020 in 1963, the cab is an aftermarket option, but the spec, the design, the build quality, those make it the most beloved tractor in Deere's 20th century history. It's a tractor that treats the farmer like a human being. And there is one more thing about the 4020 that almost no source mentions, that I think matters most. The 4020 was visually, and I mean this literally, designed by Henry Dreyfuss.
Henry Dreyfuss, the famous industrial designer.
The famous industrial designer. The trimline phone, the Polaroid camera, the Hoover vacuum, the Honeywell thermostat, the interior of the JFK-era Boeing 707. Henry Dreyfuss had been consulting for Deere continuously since 1937, when, you may remember from Act 2, an engineer named Elmer McCormick traveled to Manhattan in a fur coat and a straw hat to recruit him. 26 years later, the 4020 is the mature expression of the Dreyfuss-Deere collaboration. The cab, the grille, the dashboard layout, the seat, the control surfaces, all Dreyfuss.
So when you see a 4020 at a county fair today and think it looks like a tractor, that look is not industrial accident. That is an industrial designer who also designed the Polaroid camera, deliberately styling a piece of farm equipment.
That is what designed as strategy means. Deere has been a design company, not just a manufacturing company, since 1937. The 4020 is at the visual level, the company saying, quietly, without ever advertising it, that we care about how this thing looks, not just how it works.
That is also a moat. The look of John Deere is, by 2026, almost 100 years of consistent industrial design heritage. It is the green and yellow paint. It is the leaping deer. It is the Dreyfuss-designed cab interior, none of which competitors can copy without looking like they are copying.
The market responds accordingly. Over the production run from 1963 to 1972, Deere builds 184,000 4020s.
How many is that in human terms?
It is enough 4020s that if you parked them end to end, the line would stretch from Moline, Illinois to Atlanta, Georgia. 184,000 individual tractors, every one of them rolling off the line at the Waterloo factory at a rate of about 75 units per day.
And you can still buy these used. They are still in the field.
Still in the field. The 4020 is, in 2026, more than 60 years after its launch, a working tractor on tens of thousands of American farms. Because Deere built it out of steel that does not break and engines that do not die.
Alex, this is the part of Act 3 where the good times end. Tell it.
This is the part where the good times end. The 80s farm crisis. Open loop number 3 from Act 2, paying it off now. And it is a brutal story. Let me set the macro.
Set the macro.
1970. American agriculture is booming. Commodity prices are high. The Soviet Union, yes, the same Soviet Union that bought tractors from Wiman in 1932, is now buying American grain. Stalin is long dead. Farmers in Iowa and Kansas and Nebraska are selling wheat to Moscow at premium prices.
This is the famous grain deal.
1972. Henry Kissinger negotiated it. 25% of the entire American grain supply gets shipped to the USSR in a single year. American farmers go into the 70s feeling like they have a permanent customer.
They borrow against the feeling.
American farm debt in 1970 sits at $50 billion. By 1984, 14 years later, American farm debt is $190 billion.
$190 billion, almost a 4x increase.
Almost a 4x. And then in June 1981, Paul Volcker, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, raises the federal funds rate to 19%. He is doing this to break inflation. It works. He breaks inflation. He also breaks the American family farm.
Dwell on this. Picture a farmer in Iowa in 1980. He has borrowed money against his land to buy modern equipment, a new 4020, a new combine. He has expanded his acreage based on the assumption that commodity prices will keep rising. He is paying interest on his loans at, let's say, 8%. That is manageable. 1 year later, his interest rate has tripled. And at the same time, commodity prices start collapsing because the Soviet grain deal is winding down and inflation is dying.
Interest goes up. Income goes down, both at the same time.
Both at the same time. And the result, by 1984, is that American farm income has dropped by 40% in 3 years, while debt service has tripled.
This is the 1980s farm crisis, and it hits Deere harder than almost any other company in America.
How?
How? The Quad Cities, Moline, Davenport, Rock Island, Bettendorf, the 4 cities along the Mississippi River where Deere's main factories are, those cities lose 20,000 manufacturing jobs between 1981 and 1985. The local unemployment rate goes from 4% to over 15%.
Deere itself lays off how many people?
Between 1980 and 1983, Deere lays off approximately 40% of its workforce. 40%. We are talking about thousands of factory workers in Waterloo, in Moline, in Dubuque, getting pink slips because the farmers are not buying tractors because the farmers are losing their farms.
And then, in August 1986, the union strikes.
And then, in August 1986, the union strikes, the United Auto Workers, who represent the Deere factory employees. The strike begins on August 23, 1986. It will last 163 days, 5.5 months.
Picture the scene. Deere headquarters in Moline. The Saarinen building rusted to that beautiful earthen red. Outside, in the parking lot in early December 1986, the UAW workers stage a symbolic event. They build 14 white wooden crosses. They line the driveway leading up to the Court 10 Steel headquarters. Each cross represents 1 week the strike has dragged on. 14 weeks since the August 23rd walkout.
A funeral procession at Deere headquarters in 1986.
A funeral procession at the company that Wiman saved in 1932.
And right then, in that moment, that is when Robert Hansen, the CEO we opened the act on, has the page with the negative $229 million loss on it. December 10th, 1986. The strike has been going for 109 days. The factory is shut down. The workers are outside building crosses. The annual report is going to be the worst since 1932.
And the question is the same question Wiman faced.
The question is the same question Wiman faced. The decision is the same shape. Does Deere become a normal company that does what the market wants? Aggressive cost cuts, write off the bad farmer accounts, take the union to court? Or does Deere remember 1932?
Alex, I want to push on this because I think we are romanticizing the connection, again, the same way we did in Act 2. Did Hansen actually think about 1932 when he made his decision, or are we just retrofitting a narrative onto a board meeting that was mostly about cash flow?
Push back, and I would tell you what I think the honest answer is.
Tell me.
I do not know if Robert Hansen sat in that meeting on December 10th, 1986, and explicitly invoke Charles Deere Wiman. I have not seen a memo from him doing so. But I do know what he did. He did not crack the workforce. He did not strip mine the dealer network. He did not break the farmer credit policy. He extended the strike negotiation. He authorized further credit forbearance for farmers. He took the loss publicly. And then he handed the company off 3 years later to Hans Becherer, with the cultural DNA intact.
So he behaved as if 1932 was alive in him, whether he cited it or not.
Whether he cited it or not, the pattern survived him.
I'll take that.
The strike ends January 27, 1987. The workers ratify the contract on February 1st with 84% approval. They win job security for 90% of the workforce, improved pensions, profit sharing, and a one-time $735 bonus per worker. Wages stay flat. The strikers themselves lose up to $10,000 each in foregone earnings.
Real human cost.
Real human cost?
And then a remarkable thing happens.
Tell it.
A remarkable thing happens. In 1988, 2 years after the strike, the farm economy turns. The dollar weakens, American grain exports surge, commodity prices stabilize, the rain comes back, almost exactly the same pattern as 1934.
And the people who weather the storm.
And the people who weather the storm are the farmers who Deere did not foreclose on, the same farmers, the grandsons of the farmers Wiman saved in 1932, the sons of the farmers who bought Model A's in 1934 and 4020s in 1963. They come back to Deere because they trust Deere. Deere's market share in 1983, in the middle of the crisis, sits at 45% of North American large tractors. By 1988, just 5 years later, it is at 55%.
45 to 55%, while International Harvester, the company that did foreclose, sells its agriculture business to Tenneco and ceases to exist as an independent ag manufacturer. Alice Chalmers also exits in 1985. The 1980s farm crisis kills almost every competitor Deere has. Deere walks out.
Net income in 1988, a single year, $315 million. Just 2 years earlier, that number was negative $229 million.
A swing of more than $500 million in 2 years. The company that almost died is, by 1989, the most profitable agricultural equipment manufacturer in the world. And here is the kicker. The recovery happens just in time for the next thing.
The next thing.
The next thing.
Which almost no one outside of agriculture notices when it begins, because it begins as a 4-page memo from an engineer who walks into an executive meeting in 1994 with a wild idea. Wait, Alex, sorry, I want to take this one. Because the next 10 minutes of Act 3 is the most important thing in the entire modern John Deere story, and I want to tell it.
It's yours.
There is a guy. Don't worry about his name yet. He's an engineer at Deere in 1994. He walks into an executive meeting in Moline carrying a 4-page memo. The memo was about a technology called the Global Positioning System, GPS, a satellite-based navigation system that the U.S. military has just opened up to civilian use.
And his pitch?
His pitch is, what if we put a GPS receiver on a tractor?
Just that.
Just that. He is not pitching artificial intelligence. He is not pitching autonomous tractors. He is not pitching a data flywheel. He is pitching, in 1994, that maybe, if you knew exactly where the tractor was to within a few feet, the farmer could drive it in a straighter line, could plant rows that were more precisely parallel, could waste less seed at the edges of the field, could save maybe 2 to 5% on seed and fertilizer inputs.
A 2 to 5% efficiency gain.
A 2 to 5% efficiency gain. And the engineer, his name is Terry Pickett. You can remember the name if you want, but you don't have to. Terry Pickett is asking the executive team for budget to build a prototype GPS receiver for a tractor. The executive team approves it. They probably do not realize what they have just done.
What they have just done?
What they have just done is they have authorized the project that will 28 years later, in 2022, ship a fully autonomous tractor that drives itself across 255,000 acres of Florida sugar fields with a single operator supervising from a phone. They have authorized the project that will, in 2017, justify a $305 million acquisition of a Stanford robotics company. They have authorized the project that the FTC will sue Deere over in 2025. They do not know any of this in 1994.
They think they are funding a precision farming tool.
They think they are funding a precision farming tool. And here's the thing about Trojan horses in business. The founder of the Trojan horse rarely knows it is one.
Dwell on that.
Dwell on that. Pickett walks out of that meeting in 1994 thinking he is going to save farmers 2 to 5% on seed costs. He has, in fact, just authorized the project that will turn the most defensible iron and steel company in America into the most defensible software company in America. Same factory, same green and yellow paint, same leaping deer logo, completely different business.
How long does it take for the first GPS-enabled product to ship?
1996, 2 years later, Deere launches a product called the Green Star Precision Farming System. The first production unit ships with a GPS receiver internally called, and I love this, Green Eggs and Ham. The engineers named it Green Eggs and Ham.
That is on brand for Deere.
It is on brand for Deere. The Green Star receiver uses the NASA Global Ground Station Network with software licensed from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So we have a Deere tractor in Iowa talking to NASA satellites using JPL software in 1996. Almost nobody in technology pays attention.
And what comes next?
What comes next is 2 upgrades. Upgrade 1, 1999. Deere acquires a small company called Navcom Technology. Navcom's specialty is something called real-time kinematic GPS, or RTK. Regular GPS gets you to about 3 meters of accuracy. RTK gets you to about 2 centimeters of accuracy.
2 centimeters, the size of a strawberry.
The size of a strawberry. Upgrade 2, 2002. Deere launches a product called AutoTrack. This is the first commercial Deere autonomous steering system. You can sit in the cab of an AutoTrack-equipped tractor and let the tractor drive itself in a perfectly straight line, while you do other things like monitor the planter behind you, or talk on the phone, or eat lunch.
So by 2002, 24 years before our current date in 2026, Deere tractors are driving themselves.
They are driving themselves. And here's the part that almost nobody outside of Deere understands. Every one of those tractors is, while it drives itself, also generating data.
This is where the company becomes a software company.
Every GPS-equipped Deere tractor, from 1996 onward, knows 3 things at every moment. 1, where it is to within a few meters. 2, what it is doing, planting or spraying or harvesting. 3, what conditions it is operating in, soil moisture, ground speed, engine load.
That is 3 streams of data every second from every tractor.
3 streams of data every second from every tractor. And this is the key, the tractor is going to be in the same field tomorrow, and the day after, and every spring and every autumn, for the next 20 years.
It is the same physical patch of dirt getting measured by the same vehicle every season for 2 decades.
Every season for 2 decades, which means by the time we get to, say, 2018, a Deere tractor in central Iowa knows that field better than the farmer who owns it, because the tractor has the moisture data from every square meter of that field for 15 growing seasons.
Picture a chessboard, 64 squares. Now picture a field, 500 acres. Cut it into squares of 1 square meter each, 2 million squares. The tractor has, for 15 years, kept a record of what happened on each square, where the soil was rocky, where the soil was waterlogged, where the soybeans grew well, where the corn failed.
That is a database the farmer themselves does not have.
That is a database the farmer themselves does not have. And Deere is building the platform to host that database. They name it, about 10 years later, around 2014, the John Deere Operations Center. It is a cloud platform, like Amazon Web Services, but specifically for farms.
The Operations Center. How big is it today?
By 2024, the John Deere Operations Center is managing 330 million acres of farmland globally. By 2026, Deere is on track to have 500 million acres on the platform.
500 million.
500 million. To put that in scale, that is roughly the total cropland of the entire American food supply.
Deere is on track to host a digital twin of the entire American food supply.
A digital twin of the entire American food supply by 2026,
on a cloud platform owned by a company that started as a blacksmith shop on the Illinois prairie in 1837.
This is the John Deere of 2026.
This is the John Deere of 2026.
Okay, Alex, hand me one more section, because I want to tell the Blue River acquisition story. It is structurally the most important acquisition Deere has done since the Waterloo Boy in 1918.
Hand off.
Hand off. It is 2011. There is a startup in Sunnyvale, California, founded by two Stanford robotics graduates named Jorge Herrad and Lee Redden. Don't worry about either name. What matters is what they are building.
What are they building?
They're building a computer vision system that can look at a row of crops growing in a field, say a row of soybeans, and identify in real time which individual plants are crops and which are weeds, plant by plant, within milliseconds.
Why does that matter?
Because for the previous 100 years, the way you killed weeds on a row crop farm was you sprayed herbicide across the entire field. Every square meter got chemicals, even the squares of dirt with no weeds on them, even the squares with healthy crops. The standard sprayer covers 100% of the field. The cost of herbicide on a typical large American farm is, in 2017, around $50 per acre. On a 5,000-acre farm, that is $250,000 per year, and chemicals you mostly do not need.
And the Blue River idea is only spray the weeds.
Only spray the weeds. Herrad and Redden's system, which they call See and Spray, processes more than 20 images of plants per second, comparing each image against a training database of more than 1 million labeled plant photos. It decides, in about 100 milliseconds, whether the plant in front of the spray nozzle is a crop or a weed. If it is a weed, the nozzle fires for that one plant. If it is a crop, the nozzle stays closed.
Plant by plant, not field by field.
Plant by plant, not field by field. And the result, when you actually deploy See and Spray on a real farm, is that herbicide use drops by between 50 and 90%, depending on the crop.
50 to 90%.
50 to 90%. Real numbers from the 2024 growing season across the See and Spray Ultimate fleet, which covered roughly 1 million American acres that year. Deere measures about 8 million gallons of herbicide that were not sprayed. 8 million gallons.
How big is 8 million gallons?
8 million gallons is roughly the volume of 12 Olympic swimming pools of chemicals, not sprayed, in one growing season. And by the 2025 growing season, fleet up to 5 million acres, that number climbs above 30 million gallons saved.
Dwell on that.
Dwell on that. And remember, this is a herbicide reduction that saves farmers money on inputs, that reduces environmental contamination, that probably benefits long-term soil health. It is the rare technology that wins on 3 different axes at once.
And in 2017, Deere acquires Blue River.
2017, $305 million. About what Deere spends on its U.S. marketing budget in a single year. A rounding error for a $50 billion company. And they integrate the technology into Deere sprayers. By 2025, the See and Spray Ultimate system is in commercial deployment across 15 U.S. states. By 2026, it is being rolled out to Latin America.
Alex, do the callback.
Do the callback. In Act 2, we talked about the playbook Deere learned in 1918 with the Waterloo Boy. The playbook was, Deere does not invent the new technology. Deere acquires the new technology. Then, Deere paints it green and yellow and ships it through their existing dealer network. The product is interchangeable. The channel is not.
And Blue River in 2017 is...
Blue River in 2017 is the exact same playbook. Identical. Deere did not invent computer vision herbicide spraying. 2 Stanford graduates did. Deere bought the company, integrated the technology into existing Deere sprayer hardware, painted it green and yellow, and shipped it through the same branch house dealer network that Charles Deere set up in Kansas City in 1869.
148 years between Kansas City and Sunnyvale. Same playbook.
Same playbook.
Sam, let me take the next section because I want to talk about the autonomous tractor reveal, which is, frankly, one of my favorite small moments in modern American business history.
Take it.
Picture the Consumer Electronics Show, CES, January 2022, Las Vegas, the biggest annual technology trade show in the world. Apple does not go to CES. Google goes occasionally. The companies that show up at CES are mostly consumer electronics, TVs, phones, fitness trackers, smart home gadgets.
And in 2022, the keynote includes
John Deere. The John Deere CEO walks onto the CES stage in Las Vegas and unveils, quote, a fully autonomous tractor. A tractor that can be deployed in a field, programmed remotely, and driven for an entire work shift without a human in the cab.
A self-driving tractor.
A self-driving tractor. The hardware platform is something called the 8R, the standard Deere row crop tractor, retrofitted with 6 stereoscopic cameras, a LiDAR sensor, and radar. The autonomy stack comes from a company Deere acquired in August 2021 called Bear Flag Robotics, $250 million. Don't worry about the company name.
But it matters that they acquired it.
It matters that they acquired it because Bear Flag was the team that had been retrofitting autonomy onto existing Deere tractors in California. Deere bought the team, integrated the technology into the standard product, and within 5 months unveiled it at CES.
And what does autonomous Deere actually look like in real-world commercial deployment?
Now here is the thing I love. Because the demo in Las Vegas was a controlled environment showcase, the real-world deployments are happening at working farms, sometimes with Deere's own stack, sometimes with third-party autonomy on top of Deere hardware. The headline case in 2026 is the United States Sugar Corporation in Florida. They grow sugarcane across roughly 255,000 acres total. In May 2026, U.S. Sugar announces a fleet of 5 autonomous tractors, 4 8R row crop tractors, and 1 9R high-horsepower tractor, running on autonomy software from a Utah company called ASI Robotics, supervising all 5 from a single remote operator. The autonomy stack is third-party, not Deere's, but the hardware is Deere.
Picture that.
Picture that. A working sugar farm in Florida, cane growing in rows, and what is moving through some of the rows is not a person on a tractor. It is a tractor driving itself, watching the cane, deciding plant by plant whether to spray. The only human in the loop is somebody sitting in front of a monitor, drinking coffee, miles away.
And this is happening commercially today in 2026, not
Today.
in some future state.
Today, in 2026.
And here's the line we kept circling in Act 2, and we have to land here. This is not because Deere invented autonomous tractors. 2 Stanford graduates invented them, or the precursors of them. Deere acquired the technology, painted it green and yellow, and shipped it through their dealer network.
He industrialized it.
He industrialized it.
Okay, Alex, we have spent the last 20 minutes talking about the most successful technology pivot in 20th and 21st century industrial America. Now we have to talk about the dark side, because all of the software, the GPS, the operations center, the See and Spray, the autonomy, has a flip side. And the flip side is now a federal lawsuit. Take it.
Take it. The story starts in 2015. Deere updates its software running on its tractors, specifically a diagnostic software called Service Advisor. Service Advisor is the tool that a Deere mechanic plugs into a tractor in order to read engine codes, calibrate sensors, run diagnostics, and authorize repairs.
Sounds technical and innocuous.
Sounds technical and innocuous. The change in 2015 is Service Advisor now requires a license, and the license is only granted to authorized Deere dealerships.
Meaning?
Meaning, if your tractor breaks down in the middle of a field, let's say it is harvest season, your $800,000 combine throws an engine code, and the combine stops working, you cannot just call your local independent mechanic. You cannot just call yourself. You have to call an authorized Deere dealer.
The dealer has to plug in their licensed copy of Service Advisor, the dealer has to authorize the repair, and the dealer has to charge you for that visit.
How much does that visit cost?
It depends. It can be anywhere from $200 to $2,000 just to clear the code before any actual mechanical repair.
And how far away is the nearest Deere dealer for the average American farmer?
That is the key question. For a farmer in eastern Iowa, the nearest dealer is on average about 20 minutes away. For a farmer in eastern Montana, the nearest dealer can be 4 to 6 hours away. And in harvest season, when timing is everything, that wait can be the difference between bringing in a crop and losing a crop.
This makes farmers angry.
This makes farmers extremely angry. And starting around 2017, something fascinating begins happening on American farms. Farmers start jailbreaking their tractors with bootleg firmware they download from Eastern European websites.
Bootleg firmware?
Bootleg firmware. There is a community of Ukrainian and Polish hackers who reverse engineered Deere's Service Advisor software. They built unlicensed versions. They put them on the internet. American farmers download them, install them on laptops, and use them to repair their own tractors. And, quote, there's a Reddit thread from 2017 where an Iowa farmer describes himself as, his words, a hacker pirate on a John Deere tractor.
An Iowa farmer who is jailbreaking his own combine.
An Iowa farmer who is jailbreaking his own combine in the year 2017.
This story breaks in Motherboard. It goes viral.
This story breaks in Motherboard, Vice, the news outlet. It goes viral. The right to repair movement, which previously had been mostly about Apple iPhones, suddenly has a much more sympathetic protagonist, the American farmer being told he cannot repair his own tractor.
Dwell on the political theater of this. A farmer in Iowa with a laptop and Ukrainian firmware versus a $100 billion corporation in Moline. That is irresistible to journalists.
Irresistible. And it grows. Multiple state legislatures begin debating right-to-repair laws specifically for agricultural equipment. Colorado is first. House Bill 1011 of the 2023 session signed into law April 2023, effective January 2024. Colorado farmers now have a legal right to access Deere's repair tools.
And Deere's response.
Deere's response is, January 2023, 3 months before Colorado passes its law, Deere signs a Memorandum of Understanding with the American Farm Bureau Federation. The MOU promises that Deere will voluntarily make Service Advisor more available to farmers, will provide technical manuals, will not require dealer-only repair.
This sounds like a settlement.
This sounds like a settlement. And then, 6 months later, July 2023, an outside audit of Deere's actual delivery on the MOU concludes that, and I am going to use the audit's exact language, Service Advisor still withholds, redacts, or obfuscates critical functions.
They signed the MOU, but did not actually deliver on it.
They signed the MOU, but did not actually deliver on it. And the Federal Trade Commission notices.
And then?
January 15, 2025, the Federal Trade Commission, joined by the Attorneys General of Illinois and Minnesota, files suit against Deere & Company in federal court. 2 months later, in March 2025, an amended complaint adds Michigan, Wisconsin, and Arizona as co-plaintiffs.
Hold on. I want to pause here and do the historical callback, because this is not the first federal regulatory push against Deere's distribution network.
It is the fourth.
It is the fourth. Listen to the pattern. 1920. The Federal Trade Commission releases a 299-page report on price collusion in the agricultural implement industry. The case eventually reaches the Supreme Court. SCOTUS in 1927 rules for the industry. The 1927 ruling stands for 10 years. 1938. The FTC investigates the industry again. Burton Peake, Deere's general counsel, future president, issues an internal bulletin to all factory and branch personnel saying, quote, "Don't use the big stick in getting business," end quote. The case quietly dies. 1948. The Department of Justice files a major antitrust case against Deere, International Harvester, and J.I. Case for exclusive dealing, the same charge of using their distribution network to restrict competition. The remedy the government asks for, quote,
the defendant be perpetually enjoined from refusing to sell farm machinery to any dealer. End quote. Sound familiar? That is structurally the same remedy the FTC is asking for in 2025. The Department of Justice tries the JI Case Company first. A federal judge named Gunnar Norby dismisses the case in 1951. The case against Deere is dropped in 1952. Defending it cost Deere over $1 million. The dealer network moat survives. And now, 2025.
Fourth, federal push. 3 out of 4, historically, Deere has won.
3 out of 4, historically, Deere has won. The pattern across 105 years. Every 30 to 40 years, the federal government takes another run at Deere's distribution network. And the question we have to answer in 2026 is, does the fourth one break the streak?
Tell me.
It's complicated. 2 cases, 2 outcomes, different timelines.
2 cases. Tell me.
Track 1 is the FTC suit, filed January 2025. The legal theory: Deere has illegally monopolized the market for repair of its own tractors in violation of Section 2 of the Sherman Act. The remedy the FTC wants: Deere forced to release its Service Advisor diagnostic tools unconditionally to independent repair shops. Deere moves to dismiss. In June 2025, the federal judge denies the motion. The case proceeds. As of our recording in May 2026, the FTC suit is still pending. Deere is fighting it, the same way it fought 1920 and 1948.
So, track 1, Deere is fighting. Classic playbook.
Track 1, Deere is fighting. Track 2 is the private class action, a parallel civil suit filed by farmers, every farmer who paid for a Deere repair between January 2018 and 2025. That case, Deere does settle. In early 2026, Deere agrees to pay $99 million in cash to the class, plus structural commitments to provide better access to repair tools for the next several years.
So Deere is fighting the federal government and settling with the farmers.
Deere is fighting the federal government and settling with the farmers, which is structurally the same posture Deere has taken every time. Don't admit the principle, pay to make the noise go away.
10 years.
10 years. I want to push back on the framing here.
Push.
We have been telling this story as if right to repair is the moral failure that breaks the post-Wiman cultural DNA of Deere. The company that did not foreclose on farmers in 1932 is, 90 years later, charging farmers $2,000 to fix their own tractors. The optics are bad, the press is bad, the lawsuit is real. But I want to ask, does this actually break the Deere moat in 2026?
Tell me your view.
My view is probably not. The repair business was generating significant aftermarket revenue, yes, but the repair business was not the moat. The moat, and we said this in Act 2, is the dealer network, which is now combined with the data flywheel. Deere can lose the repair monopoly and still have the data monopoly. They are different businesses.
Pushback accepted, but I want to add a nuance.
Add it.
The cultural cost. The repair fight changed the public perception of Deere from sympathetic family business hero to monopolist tech company. That is a brand asset Wiman built in 1932 that has been substantially damaged in the period from 2017 to 2025. Whether or not the moat is intact, the affection is depleted. And for a company that runs on 3 generations of farmer loyalty, affection matters.
Conceded. The moat is intact. The affection is wounded.
The affection is wounded.
Sam, traditionally on these podcast episodes, we close with an analytical framework. Let's run the 7 powers.
Hamilton Helmer's 7 powers applied to John Deere in 2026.
Scale economies.
Yes, full stop. Deere is bigger than its next 2 competitors, CNH Industrial and Kubota, combined in North American large tractors. The unit economics of building tractors get dramatically better at Deere's scale.
Network economies.
Emerging. The See and Spray data flywheel is a real network effect. Every Deere sprayer in a field generates training data. The next Deere sprayer is more accurate because of the previous one. This network effect did not exist before 2017. It exists now.
Counter-positioning.
Yes, strong. The reason CNH and Kubota cannot just copy See and Spray is that they do not have a fleet of GPS-equipped sprayers already operating across the Corn Belt. Deere built that fleet during a decade when precision agriculture was a rounding error. Now the data lead is structurally impossible to catch.
Switching costs.
Enormous.
A modern Deere operation has years of soil-level data tied to the operations center. Switching to CNH means losing your historical yield data. That is a six-figure switching cost for a 5,000-acre operation.
Branding.
The strongest in industrial equipment. We have talked about why. 1932. Even with the affection wound from right to repair, the brand remains the strongest in the category.
Cornered resource.
The dealer network. Roughly 2,000 multi-generational family-owned dealerships across North America. Nobody else has anything close.
Process power.
Call this one a wash. Deere is a good manufacturer. They are not uniquely good. CNH makes a fine tractor too.
Sum it up.
6 out of 7 powers. Strong yes on 5, emerging yes on the 6th, wash on the 7th. That is one of the highest scores any company has ever scored on the framework.
6 out of 7.
6 out of 7.
Final analytical move. Letter grades on the most important decisions in the story.
Grade the Waterloo Boy acquisition, 1918.
A+. The only reason this company exists in the tractor era. Without it, Deere is a 19th century plow business that dies between 1920 and 1940.
Grade Wiman's 1932 decision to not foreclose.
This is the only A++ I am giving today. Not just a great decision, it is the foundational asset of the modern company. Every dollar of brand equity Deere has in 2026 traces back to that one call.
Grade the Blue River acquisition, 2017.
A+, $305 million for what is now arguably the most valuable AI deployment in agriculture, the most underpriced acquisition of the 2010s. People remember Facebook buying Instagram for $1 billion. Deere bought Blue River for a third of that price, and the strategic value is comparable.
Grade the right to repair handling.
D+, maybe a C-. Deere had this fight coming for a decade. They could have voluntarily opened Service Advisor in 2017 when the motherboard article ran. Instead, they fought it through 2025, made farmers furious, lost the brand affection, and ended up settling anyway. They got the worst possible version of the outcome they were going to be forced into eventually.
A textbook example of fighting an inevitable outcome instead of leading it.
A textbook example.
Sam, we are about to close the episode. Let me set up the closer.
Set it up.
We started Act 1 on a wooden dock at Boston Harbor in 1808. A tailor with a letter, about to disappear at sea, leaving behind a 4-year-old son named John. We closed Act 1 on a quiet board meeting in 1913, 27 years after that son's death, where the directors rewrote his epitaph from inventor of the steel plow to he gave to the world the steel plow.
6 words of corporate hedging.
6 words of corporate hedging. We opened Act 2 on the deathbed in 1907, Charles Deere telling his cousin, "I'm sick forever." We closed Act 2 with William Hewitt taking over a global company in 1955.
And Act 3.
And Act 3 opens with a single document on a December morning in 1986, a $229 million loss, and it closes here in May 2026 with a federal antitrust settlement, an autonomous tractor fleet in Florida, and a 500 million-acre cloud platform.
From one man's blacksmith shop in 1837 to a digital twin of American agriculture in 2026. 189 years.
189 years. And the thread through all of it, the thing that survives every generational transition, every technology pivot, every external threat, is one promise the founder's son wrote in his journal in 1860 and his great-grandson kept in 1932. I will not put my name to a paper that I do not expect to pay. We will not foreclose on the people who buy from us. The cultural DNA that survives every era of the company is the same single moral commitment, made over and over again by different people across 2 centuries.
That is the John Deere story.
That is the John Deere story.
Listeners, thanks for spending 3 acts with us.
Thanks for being here. See you next time.
See you next time.